This meeting is called to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District for Wednesday, December 15th at 5 p.m. Next on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Could I ask Director Pennick to lead us?
Yes, please. All right. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next is roll call, if you'll indicate your presence.
Chair, let the record reflect that I'm coming up as Jim Hernandez.
Yeah, I didn't realize everybody had moved.
Oh, you know what?
So
I came up as me
we
too.
have not adjusted the names yet, so we'll probably have to forego that and just do a verbal.
Okay.
Okay. Director Pennick,
Here.
Director Boyd Hodgson,
Here.
Director Snell,
Here.
and I'm here as well, and Director Hernandez is absent. Okay, additions to the agenda? I assume there's none.
Is this, if I would like to revisit something that we have covered in a past meeting, is now the time to say that? Or do I save it for the end, or?
Probably at the end.
Now would be the time if you want to add an agenda item, but not on the agenda, so I'm not sure which one you're asking to do.
Okay, I would like to move that we revisit the selection of vice president of the board so that we remain in compliance with our policy.
Technically, you all would have to add an agenda item to consider what would be a motion for reconsideration, so if you want to.
Do I make that motion?
Yes, you would move to add an item on the agenda for motion to reconsider, I guess it's the election or the appointment of the vice president of
Okay.
the board.
Okay, I would like to move to add to the agenda reconsideration for the appointment of the vice president.
I can second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. And
Point of clarification. This particular addition, I just want to get a legal opinion. Additions to the agenda. In reading this, it's for emergency situations. Would this be deemed an emergency?
It's not, it didn't arise under this, and technically would need to be something in that vein to be added. It was a prior matter considered by the board.
It seems like on 2.5 committee appointees and representatives, I don't know if it would fall under that. It's not a big issue, I know, but is that something that would fall under agenda item 2.5?
It really doesn't fit under 2.5.
Is that strictly the committees?
Yeah, this is specifically to committee appointments and outside agency representatives.
Okay.
So I would say that at the end of the meeting, there's an opportunity to add items to a future agenda, which probably be the more proper way. I know it puts us in an
Okay.
awkward situation tonight, but that's
Okay.
probably the best way to do it.
Okay.
So,
so we're
So
not
we withdraw the motion, and then we'll deal with it on request for
At the end.
future agenda.
feature. Okay.
Do I withdraw the motion then? Is that,
Yeah,
okay, motion withdrawn.
thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Second?
And moved by Director Sinella, seconded by Director Boyd Hodgson. Please vote. Passes unanimously. Okay, now's the time for public comment. I did not receive any speaker slips, so I assume there's no public comment.
we did not receive any emails or public comments prior to the meeting.
Okay, now on to the fun part of the agenda, presentations. I'll
Yeah.
let you kick it off.
Yeah, so if I can maybe ask Dawn to come to the front of the room and maybe stand at the podium, I appreciate it.
That's what that's about.
Thank you. So on April 21st, 2021, the board approved naming the Meadowlark Reclamation Facility Operations Building after Don McDougall, who has long supervised operations there. Dawn has spent 33 years with Vallecitos and has devoted nearly her entire professional career into protecting the environment by safely treating wastewater. So it's an honor to have worked with somebody like Dawn, who has dedicated so much time, energy, and passion into a single pursuit. And Dawn's legacy will be honored by the installation of a plaque at the entrance to the Meadowlark Reclamation Facility building, which will hereafter be named the Dawn McDougall Building. And the plaque is just a small token of our appreciation and gratitude that we owe Dawn. She's joined tonight by her husband, so raise your hand there. And almost, I think all of the Meadowlark Reclamation staff, so if you can all raise your hands out there.
Great.
And Ivan has joined us. Ivan was in a bad accident, and he's in there, they're in a wheelchair, and he came to show his support, so I think that says a lot about how much Dawn's staff feel about her. I'd just like to say personally, Dawn, you're awesome. I mean, I've loved working with you. It's been a tremendous honor, and we'll certainly miss you. My path first crossed with Dawn over 10 years ago. I was working at the city of Carlsbad, and I get these emails and texts from this lady, Dawn McDougall, at Vallecitos, talking about unintentional discharges into San Marcos Creek. And it flowed through the city of Carlsbad, and I was the public works director then. And I said, who the heck is Dawn McDougall? Well, I've gotten to know who Dawn McDougall is, and she's pretty awesome, and we're going to miss her.
I think we all agree.
But it's comforting to know that she's really trained a staff behind her, right? And they're ready to carry the burden that Dawn's carried these last 3 decades. So I'd like to invite the board to come on down and join Dawn down in front of the dais here to receive the plaque, and I'll give the plaque to President Elitharp for the actual presentation. And we'd like to get some pictures, maybe first with Dawn and the board, and then with her husband, and then with the Meadowlark staff members. So. Yeah, you want to just sign it out, the pictures, that's happening.
Good to see you again. Sorry you're going. God, you dang it.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you.
I was gonna ask him that. Can we do one after with the masks off? Is that gonna kill anybody?
I took mine off.
Oh, good for you. All right. We already been subjected to everything else.
Oh, here it is.
That's pretty beautiful.
It's heavy.
That's nice.
Why don't you turn around so you can
Yeah,
get a photo?
you got it?
Yep.
Well, since you got masks off,
Yeah?
why don't y'all scoot in a little bit, and maybe Don, in front of the logo there, a little over,
A little over.
and then everybody in.
There you go. Great.
Get another one. And, sorry, I trust my phone more than that. Just the way it is. Super.
Okay.
So we shift and have, oh yeah, Don's face, right?
Oh, yeah, come on up. Go just, them two or us, all of us?
All of you.
All of you.
Oh, good.
My husband worked for the district for 23 years.
Oh, geez, a short timer, huh?
And I'll do 1, 2, 3. Got it there.
Do you want this to
Why
hold?
don't you two camera?
Larry?
Hmm?
You want to help me hold this?
Okay,
Okay,
let's get the crew.
all right, good. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'll shake your hand there someplace.
Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we gotta find somebody to mount it. Yeah.
Thanks for pulling me out.
It's just this.
What's that?
That being, it's a,
Totally open talking about it.
between operators.
Purple writing?
What do they call that? I don't know if Jim's in the way there or not.
You want to scoot over this way?
Skinny faces.
Is that good? Thank you.
You don't have to put up your own sign, do you?
Yeah, you can
Pardon?
sit
You don't
down.
have to put up your own sign, do you?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I don't know, I trust her to do that.
I know,
think
I
it'd
know.
probably
You
be
got a
I can find the right
very
people to do
sturdy.
it.
I'm sure you could.
Where do you want me to put this?
Chris can take that back.
I've got the little bolts upstairs.
And Don, don't go anywhere, you're not leaving yet, so. If we can continue with the board. So this is the water drop, this is what we award to all of our retiring employees. And we don't normally bring them to the board, it's usually like an employee appreciation, but Don, since you're here today, it pales in comparison to having a building named after you, but hopefully it shows the appreciation we have for you. So congratulations on your retirement, and thanks for all the work.
Thank you. I want to say thank you. It's an honor. And I just want to say it's been a great career here at Vallecitos. And I have great staff. They'll take care of that plant. They're dedicated to it. They know it very well. They've been great. They've supported me and backed me the whole time. And it's been awesome. It's been an awesome career here at the district. And Ed, wherever you're at, I know you're out there, but Ed as our O&M manager is a great leader, and he's given us all the support we needed, and it's been appreciated through the ranks of the treatment plant. And I have to say, my husband, all the nights, middle of the night, getting calls, going out, skipping dinners, he knows the drill, so it's been just a great career, and I just want to say thank you all very much. And this district, there's a lot of great people. Everybody supports everybody, and that's awesome. And that's all I can say, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you to your husband and for your coworkers that come out. It's really nice to show that support. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so we have another presentation.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, you guys
Thanks for
can
coming.
Yep, thanks.
scoot out here. So our third presentation, so as the board knows, our communications staff has developed a video series entitled The Work We Do. These videos highlight the projects, activities, and the people that demonstrate the work that we do here at Vallecitos. We did submit this video series for the Huell Hauser Excellence in Communications Award, and that's administered by the ACWA, Association of California Water Agencies. Our video series was selected as one of the 5 finalists. Out of all the submittals, we were one of the 5 finalists. We didn't win the award this year. I believe the city of Modesto did for their series that they put together about water. But we were one of the 5 finalists, so that's excellent. And I think it's nice to be recognized for your excellence in any activity and communication in particular in the drought situation we're in. So I'd like to maybe present the award to President Elitharp, and once again ask the board to come down if the board desires to take a picture with the award. It's not as big or as heavy as Dawn's, but it's a nice recognition.
Who takes a picture when we give it to the picture team?
Oh, yeah. Chris, do you want me to take pictures? Be in it? Sure. Okay.
And really, this award is really Alicia's award.
Yeah.
And Director Hernandez for saying, hey, submit this for an award.
And I can tell you that our good friends at Alevine, that second-class district, we gave them some heavy shots.
Right?
Yeah, and they were happy to see that neither of us won it because Kim was there.
Right? Well, and the 1, 2, 3, the winning submittal
Yeah.
included
There were some serious
20-minute
competition.
video.
There was some serious competition, so, getting to the finalists.
That was the winner, an hour
Was the
and
winner.
20-minute
It was
video?
an hour and 20 minutes, and you go, who's gonna, did anybody really watch it? 1, 2, 3. Awesome, thank you.
Because ours was about, what, 5 minutes? 3
Well, usually they're about 3 minutes each,
Yeah.
but we had a lot of them.
There's Not a lot of Hollywood movies for an hour or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
No, they gotta be an hour and 90, an hour and a half.
That was the director's cut.
So while you all return to your seats, I just wanted to,
Should we just stay down here?
I don't. You and Craig can stay down here.
What's happening?
Well, you can sit back.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone else can sit down besides directors Sinella and Elithon.
We're
So,
gonna name this building now, or was that work?
Yeah, you got the mortgage with it.
on the previous item, I just want to say great job by Chris's team, particularly Alicia and Lisa. They do all the real hard work on that. No
They sure
offense,
did.
Chris. And I'd like to also acknowledge all of our employees that show up in those videos, because they do a great job. And these are not trained actors, and they just have it inside of them. They love what they do, and it really shows. And I think it was their participation that really gave life to those videos. So, all right, so our fourth and final presentation is to commemorate Director Sinella for his service as our board president in 2021. It's another challenging year with COVID, and we didn't get to do a lot of the things we normally do. But I think under President Sinella's leadership, he got us through that. We never missed a meeting. We got all the work done that we needed to get done. So congratulations, and President Elithar has your outgoing plaque.
Yeah, I think I said at the last meeting, you got us through these very challenging times. I know you worked quite a bit with our general manager to make sure that happened. I think you did it in a tremendously professional and transparent way, and I certainly appreciate it, and I think I speak for everybody.
Thank you, Craig, appreciate it.
A little bit of deja vu. I think we stood here 5 years ago
Yeah.
and thanked you for a job well done.
Yeah.
Right? Well, you got a book that time.
Yep,
But we had all kinds of photos of you.
this is kinda
And
cool.
so the challenge is just getting enough photos to,
Especially during COVID, right?
that's what I mean.
Yeah, for Directors Pennick and Boyd Hodgson, we typically put together a book. It's a really nice book and has tons of pictures in there, but it's filled with activities and events, and we just haven't had many of those. So
Yeah.
we kind of switched to a plaque this year.
That's really nice, though.
Yeah,
That's really
and last
nice.
year, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
That
well
looks
done.
good.
It's-
Oh, see, there you got some photos.
That's the nice Cliff Note version.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah. But we hope to resume the book, the more detailed and more pictures as we
Yeah, look
start
at there.
having more events.
That's nice.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure serving, and it's always easier when you have a phenomenal board to serve with, and I just appreciate everybody's patience with me through the kind of unusual year, but we had, like our general manager said, it was a very productive year, and we got all the board's business done anyways, and you guys were just as much of a part of that as I was, and I really appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's it for the presentations. Next is a consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon by the board by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requests that a particular item or items be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it will be considered separately under action items.
Move to approve consent calendar?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Director Hernandez, seconded by Director Sinella. Please, do we need a,
We'll need to retake the attendance to add in Director Hernandez.
oh, gotcha, okay. I think that'll reset the voting.
Yeah, and Jonathan, do we need to take roll call votes since the voting as displayed doesn't match with the seats and the?
It will now.
It does now.
Oh, you did it all.
Fixes it now. Yeah.
Johnny, so I'll display the vote, or start the
It's
vote.
quick.
No pun intended, it's Johnny on the spot.
And the vote is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to our action items. 2.1, update on water cost of service study.
I'll start with that, President Elithar. So whenever an agency is considered raising its utility rates, they're required to follow a well-defined process to ensure the public is well-informed and has an opportunity to provide input. And one step of that process is the preparation of what's called a cost of service study. And given that our water rates have not increased in over a year and a half, and it'll be 2 years by the time we actually get around to increasing the rates, we think it is time to start that study. The Finance Committee has received several updates on the status of this cost of service study. The purpose of the item on tonight's agenda is to provide the entire board with the information to date and to receive board direction on how to move forward with the completion of the cost of service study and the rate setting process. So tonight we're going to have Finance Manager Wes Owen, our Principal Financial Analyst Mike Arthur, and our Consultant John Wright provide the update. So Wes, are you going to kick us off, or is Mike going to kick us off?
I think I'll let Mike kick us off. It's going to be mostly his presentation tonight. So Mike, if you want to take over, go ahead.
Sure. Give me 1 second to share my screen. And okay, so the cost of service study PowerPoint should be up. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, President Elithart, members of the board. It's my honor to give you an update on the cost of service study. We've been working with Vallecitos for a little over a year, and we're going to kick it off, and I'll introduce John Wright, who's the senior manager at Vallecitos. John.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to present tonight, and I'm going to walk you through sort of an overview of the cost of service or the rate study process, and then Michael will get into some of the guts of proposed rates. So just as a really quick overview of what we do in a cost of service study, the first thing we do is we lay out a financial plan for the district, and we ask ourselves over the next 5 years, what level of revenue do we need to cover our operating and capital expenditures and maintain adequate cash reserves and an adequate level of debt service coverage. And the outcome of that financial planning process is the development of a revenue requirement from rates. Another way of saying that is the amount of rate revenue we need to earn from our customers. And when we develop that in the financial planning process, the next step is to engage in a cost of service study. And a cost of service study is basically looking at how our individual customer classes, in the Vallecitos case, that would be customers of different meter size use water, and we allocate the cost to them, the rate revenue requirement to them based on their demand characteristics. And the allocation of costs using this approach, which is an industry standard approach, lays a foundation for us to have a high probability of Proposition 218 compliance. And then finally, we step into rate design, where we develop the rates that we're going to be charging our customers by each consumption tier, once again with the goal of ensuring Proposition 218 compliance as best we can. And we start with the development of rates for fiscal year 22, which is the current fiscal year we're in right now, as well as rates for the period through, I believe, fiscal year 25. So another way of looking at this cost of service study process, starting in the left of the slide, is we really sit down with the executive team and also the board, and we talk about what you would like to achieve with your rates. And even though we have to comply with Prop 218, it is possible for us to achieve various objectives with the particular rate design that we recommend that you implement. And those objectives might range from cost-based conservation price signals or water efficiency price signals to achieving some specific mix of fixed versus variable revenue recovery. So once we set the rate setting framework, we move on to the financial planning process as discussed previously. We develop that revenue requirement from rates as an outcome of the financial plan. And then we move into the cost of service study and the rate design process. And then finally, what we need to do is once we have presented to the board the proposed rates for the next upcoming 4 or 5 year period, is we have to present you also a very comprehensive report. And what this report will do is it will outline everything that was done in the cost of service study process, how the financial plan was developed, how the revenue requirement was developed, how and why costs were allocated the way they were to our different meter size based customer classes, how and why we developed the rates by tier. And we do this so that the district will have a strong administrative record in case anyone ever questions the rates or wants to challenge the rates in any way. And under the Prop 218 process, there's a very specific set of requirements as to how you notice the proposed rates and the opportunity to give parcel owners in the service territory a chance to raise an objection if they want to, and then what you need to do in terms of public hearings to adopt rates. So, just a quick overview of what this concept of cost of service is. The cost of service is really a way to align the amount of revenue we recover from customers with the costs that they impose on our utility system. So when you think about it, different types of customers have different types of demands. There are some customers that use water in a manner where they're primarily all of their usage is in tier 1. There are other customers who have a large amount of water use and use water not only in tier 1, but perhaps tier 2 and even a significant use in tier 3. And one of the key ways that we allocate costs to customer classes is by looking at what we call peaking factors. And a peaking factor is a reflection of a customer class's maximum day demand expressed as a ratio of maximum day to annual average day, and also their maximum hour demand, which is in effect the maximum hour of usage demand that they impose on our system within the maximum day. And customer classes that have higher peaking factors cause us to incur higher costs. And specifically, we have to design, construct, and operate our infrastructure to meet peak demands. And so those classes that impose higher peak demands draw more costs or allocated more costs in the cost of service study. And what this allows us to do is ultimately develop rates that are fully aligned with the demand characteristics of the customer, and to the maximum extent possible, eliminate any cross subsidies so that each group is really paying its own way for the costs they impose on your water utility system. So California, we have Proposition 218, which I believe dates back to 1996. That's a constitutional provision that was enacted. And basically, Proposition 218 is a mandate for having cost of service rates, cost justified rates. And there are certain key characteristics of Prop 218 that we have to comply with. Our rates can't exceed the cost of providing service, bullet point 1. The revenue we collect from rates needs to be used to provide service. It can't be used for any other purpose other than providing, in this case, water service. The rates that we charge and the revenue we recover can't exceed the proportional cost of serving an individual parcel. And within the context of Prop 218, another way I think of interpreting parcel is account, customer account. And of course, we can't charge rates for a service that isn't available. And lastly, we have to go through the specific noticing process of 45 days prior to having a Prop 218 hearing where the board may elect to adopt rates. This is a graphic that talks about how we allocate the amount of rate revenue we need to particular types of demands on our system. And so once the paint can is done emptying here, let's talk a little bit about what these types of demands are in our system. Well, we know we need to obtain water supply and provide water supplies to our customers. And we do that primarily through water from the San Diego County Water Authority, but also the Olivenhain Municipal Water District. We know we have to supply the base demand, or another way of saying this is the annual average day demands of our customers throughout the years. We know that an important characteristic of water utilities, especially here in California, is we want our customers to use water wisely, and we do incur costs for conservation. And we want to make sure that we have all of our conservation costs clearly identified, and we're allocating them properly within the rate study to our different customer classes. Then finally, we get to this bucket in green called extra capacity, and in parentheses, peaking costs. This is the type meeting the demand of customers on a maximum day and maximum hour maintenance. And then really we have two types of demand on our system that are not really directly related to the level or intensity of water usage. One is we have to maintain our meters on our system. And we not only have to maintain them from an operational perspective, but we have to maintain them in terms of replacing meters and having some meter-related capital expenditures. And finally, the last type of demand that we have to meet on our system is the demand our customers have for customer service. This means meter reading, it means billing, and it also means having a call center to answer our customer questions. Michael, is this my section as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, so when the district retained the services of my firm on this latest cost of service study endeavor, the one that we're currently on right now, really what the district wanted to have was a very comprehensive review of how costs are allocated to your customer classes and how your rates are designed. You know, it says top to bottom review, and that's really what Wes and Michael and I have really been doing over the past year, is looking at how your costs are allocated and your rates are developed. And within that context, what we wanted to do for the board was develop at least two alternative water rate structures. And we have had previous presentations to the board where we've talked about the rate study and talked about some of those rate structure options. And within the context of looking at alternative water rate structures, we wanted to make sure that we were considering key financial management and rate structure policy issues. And once again, this is things like fixed versus variable cost recovery. Sending conservation price signals would be, or water efficiency price signals would be an example. Obviously, our rates need to be in full compliance with California regulatory requirements and case law. Developing multi-year rates, so this is not a question of the board just adopting rates for FY22 if you elect to adopt rates. It's a question of having a Prop 218 notice that is a multi-year set of rates. One of the other things that's really, really important to us with these rates is the notion of a, quote, pass-through charge. And so when you think of a pass-through charge, the two charges that immediately come to mind are water supply costs. San Diego County Water Authority and Livenhain Municipal Water District adjust their rates every year based on their changing costs, and they pass those costs on to the district. And so within the context of developing rates, we want to give the district the opportunity every year to adjust the rates as needed to recover the additional costs that have been provided or have been imposed on you by your water service suppliers. And there's a way to do that without having to notice under Prop 218 every year. We also wanted to develop for you drought rates. And drought rates are a method of recovering your fixed costs during periods of drought curtailment, where, for example, the state of California through the Department of Water Resources declares a drought emergency and they order utilities to cut back, for example, 10 or 20 or 30% in terms of customer water consumption. Well, when you do that, you lose a very large chunk of your water sales revenue. And drought rates are in effect a surcharge on top of your regular volumetric rates to ensure that you have adequate cost recovery to meet your remaining fixed costs and not put the utility in jeopardy from a financial sufficiency perspective. The goal associated with this whole process was to implement new rates on March 1st of next year. And then also something Michael and Wes and I have been working on is the development for you of a brand new Microsoft Excel rate model that we believe will be much easier to use than the current rate model, and hopefully very helpful to staff. There is a long history at the district of water cost of service studies. The district completed its own water cost of service study, that is the district staff, in 2017. And you issued a very comprehensive report in 2017. And you retained the services of my firm, Raftellus, in 2020, which is basically to develop rates effective on March 31st, 2020, with no change in your existing rate structure. And then our current study began in September 2020, so we're into it a little bit over a year. And the way we kicked off in September 2020, and Michael, I apologize to you, just one last thing on that previous slide. The way we kicked off in September 2020 was we had a board pricing objectives workshop where we talked about rate structures and we talked about some of the objectives that the board considered most important in a rate structure. So conclusions from that pricing objectives exercise with the board in September 2020 was what the board considered the most important objectives were: one, customer bill affordability for essential use customers. And I would tend to think of essential use as being non-discretionary indoor water consumption. It's water consumption that takes place year round for bathing and toilet flushing, cleaning within the dwelling unit. And also the board was concerned about bill affordability associated with average use customers. And this is average use customers in terms of both indoor non-discretionary water consumption as well as average consumption for outdoor irrigation. The board also considered it very important that we have a rate structure that customers understand. And then needless to say, number 3 there is almost a given, an equitable allocation of water supply costs, which is something that we have to do to comply with Prop 218. Okay, so just a quick look at our existing rate structures, and I have to apologize to you for this slide. It's a little bit fuzzy, but when you think about your existing commodity charge rate structure, right now your rate structure is based on meter size. And so meter sizes are in effect the customer classes on the district's system. Your customer classes aren't single family residential and industrial and commercial, but they are meter sizes. And we've got a 3-tier rate structure where the amount of consumption allowed in each tier increases as we move up in meter size. So you can see 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters, we've got tier 1 is 1 through 6 HCF, and that basically equates to average indoor water consumption. And then as we move up in meter size, not only tier 1, but all the other tiers, the amount of consumption that's allowed in each tier goes up because the meter has a greater capacity to use water. And then within that context, down sort of in the bottom half of this slide, you can see that we're charging rates in tier 1 that are $3.77 per HCF. And then we move up to tier 3 and we're charging $9.18 per HCF. So when we think about this tiered rate structure, a couple concerns came up for us. How do we deal with the allocation of water supply costs from the Carlsbad desalination plant, which is operated by the San Diego County Water Authority and which has very high water rates coming out of Carlsbad. And the district has a unique contract for Carlsbad water supply. How do we allocate those high Carlsbad costs, especially as it relates to whether all those costs should be recovered through tier 3 or our other tiers? And then a question came up regarding your homeowners associations with large meters and the tier consumption widths for some of our meters that were at 3 inches and larger. Because what we're finding is some of those large meter sized customers, especially your homeowners association and your irrigation customers, we're finding that there was a concentration of consumption in tier 3, meaning most of their water usage was happening at tier 3 and they were paying the higher marginal tier 3 rate. Well, in addition to commodity costs, the district also charges what you call a readiness to serve charge. And a readiness to serve charge is a monthly fixed charge that is based in meter size. And the reason that the monthly fixed charge goes up by meter size is that larger meters have a larger capacity to use water. And your system must stand ready to provide instantaneous water service even to the largest meter on your system. And so the way we allocate costs for the readiness to serve charge is based on what costs we incur as we move up in meter size. And these are basically what are known as meter capacity costs. So that's a key thing that you have on your system, is another major component. And this is the fixed revenue recovery piece of your rate structure, whereas the commodity rates we saw previously were the variable revenue recovery piece. We can probably move on. Yeah, and so the district has a really unique service territory. You have, it looks like almost 10 different elevation zones. And so as we move up in elevation and move through each one of these different zones, we incur higher electricity costs to pump water. So in addition to our regular dollar per 8 CF commodity rate, we also have to add an elevation zone, I'll call it a surcharge, that might not be the right way to put it, but an additional commodity rate amount to reflect the fact that as we move up in elevation on the system, we have higher pumping costs, primarily electricity costs. Now I'm going to turn it over, I believe, Michael, to you to really get into the nuts and bolts of some of these rate scenarios that we looked at.
Great. Thank you, John. I really appreciate your help on all that. So some of the scenarios, we met last month, I believe, in November with the Finance Committee, and I wanted to review the exact same scenarios that we reviewed with them. So there's 3 scenarios that we reviewed with them. One we'll label the base scenario. So what the base scenario is taking the Excel model that we developed, and there was no real changes to the current methodology other than updating the budget numbers, the water demand numbers, and blending the allocation of water supply costs. John mentioned the desal cost. Previously, in our previous study back in 2017, all of the desal costs were applied to Tier 3 revenue. Tier 3 rates, and that's why the Tier 3 rates more than doubled as you went from Tier 2 to Tier 3. And I will go a little bit deeper into each of these scenarios in another slide. Another scenario that we modeled was desals as a fixed charge. Our desal, we have a contract with the Bud Lewis desal plant, and that's a take or pay contract. So whether we use a drop of water or purchase a drop of water or not, we need to pay for 3,500 acre feet per year. So one determination is, well, that's really a fixed cost because we have to pay that regardless. So one of the scenarios we modeled was to put the additional cost of the desal water as a fixed portion of the customer bill. So we would include it as a readiness to serve charge. And the third scenario that we modeled was we have some revenue that's we'll call discretionary revenue. That's the property tax and our RDA revenue. It's about almost $2.5 million. And with that, the board has kind of discretion as to where to apply that money to. Currently, with our current model, that $2.5 million is applied equitably amongst all tiers, fixed costs, everything. The board at its discretion can determine that they want to apply a portion of it to offset some of the Tier 1 costs and or Tier 2 costs. So that was one that we modeled. And the model that we showed had a 75% of that $2.5 million offset to Tier 1 and 25% of that revenue to Tier 2. So there were other scenarios that we reviewed as well. John mentioned that we did a comprehensive study, and some of the things that we thought that we did were applying, we mentioned the desal is putting on fixed $5 million. Well, our full desal cost is about $10 million. So one of the things we looked at was putting the entire $10 million on the fixed charge. Well, once we did an initial study on that, we kind of rejected that because what it would do, it increase the readiness to serve charge by about $20 for a 5/8-inch meter. What it would mean is that a customer that used like 1 unit of water, 2 units of water, they would see a $20 increase just by this proposal. So that one was quickly rejected. Another one we mentioned, John mentioned that we have our customer class rather than customer type, we go by meter size. We looked at doing it by customer type too, commercial, residential, irrigation, and doing the tier widths and allocations based on that. But we found that the usage patterns were more similar by meter size than with customer type. So there was more homogeneity between those. We also looked at things as like doing a flat commodity rate for all customers. So for example, everyone pays $6 per unit for every unit. And there were other things that we looked at too, but either because they weren't in compliance with Prop 218 or because they were drastic changes we do not fully model. So I want to go back to the 3 scenarios again. I'm going to go a little bit in detail onto what each of these scenarios would mean to an average customer. We've also modeled what a low customer's bill would look like, the average customer's bill would look like, and a high user's bill would look like. So for the base scenario, here's a sample bill. And again, when we talk about average customer, I'll just reiterate that it's a single family residential unit using 13 units of water with a 5/8" meter. So currently that customer pays about $55, almost $56 in their commodity costs. That's the 13 units of water. And then the fixed portion, their readiness to serve, is $36 for a total bill of about $92. So modeling the base, which was the scenario 1, which again, what we did was update the budget, demand, and allocate desal costs among all tiers. What that would do, the bottom line, it would increase the customer's bill by about $3.43 or 3.7%. The desal scenario, which again was putting about $5.2 million of the commodity costs onto fixed charges. And right now, I just want to draw your attention, and this is the portion that would be, you see it's a $12 increase. That's because we're getting that $5.2 million and putting it all onto readiness to serve charge. So it's not surprising that the commodity portion would go down and that the readiness to serve portion would go up. So the total bill on this scenario would be about $97, a $5 increase, or about 5.6%. Then we mentioned that the board has discretionary revenue that they could use to offset some of the tier 1, tier 2 costs. So we modeled that. The discretionary revenue is about $2.4 million. And what we modeled for the finance committee last month was taking 75% of that $2.4 million and offsetting the commodity costs for tier 1 users, and the remaining 25% to offset for tier 2. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this scenario in a minute too. So the net result for that would be an average customer increase of about $1.84 or 2%. And let me show you, I told you about the low, average, and high users. So what this will do is this will show each of those scenarios and what the effect would be on each of those 3 different types of customers that use those different demands. So again, this is the base scenario. Here's our current rates that we saw a couple slides ago. With this methodology, our tier 1 rate would go up about 32 cents, tier 2, 16 cents, and our tier 3 would go down $1.48. Now, this looks like a huge benefit to tier 3 customers, but previously, as we mentioned, that all of desal was applied to tier 3 customers before, and the desal water supply is really for water reliability. It's not to benefit one specific customer. We didn't get the desal water to offset demand for tier 3 users. We use it for really supply reliability, which really benefits all customers. So melding the cost of water amongst all 3 tiers, we've talked with our consultants and with our legal, and it seemed to be more appropriate to do it that way. So what would it mean to the average bill, or what I mentioned, the low? So we're defining low as 4 units of water. And again, our standard for our average user is 13 units of water. And a high customer, we modeled at 30 unit water. And the red line shows these are the numbers that you saw on the previous slide. So our low user under this base scenario would see their bill increase by about $1.67 or 3.2%. Our average customer, $3.43 or 3.7%. And our high user, $8.61, decrease or 4%. I'm going to do the same type of analysis for the desal as a fixed charge, and then the property tax offset. And I won't go really quickly.
Quick question, Mike, sorry to interrupt. If you go back
Yes.
to that previous slide.
Yes, Director Benak.
That previous slide. So
Yes.
13 units average, is that all in tier 1 and 2? When does somebody go from a tier 2 to a tier 3?
Yeah, so for our 5/8" meter, 5/8 and 3/4" meter, the tier 1 breakpoint is 0 to 6 units.
Okay.
So this particular customer would be using 6 units in tier 1 and 7 units in tier 3.
And then what's
So to
tier
get
2?
to this,
6 to what? 7 to what is tier 2?
7 to 21, I believe.
Okay, then you don't get
And
into
then
tier 3.
22,
Okay,
yeah, 22 units and over.
gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. So for desal, it's part of the fixed charge. So because the desal portion, that 5.2 million is going on to fixed, it makes sense that the commodity would come down a lot. And the readiness to serve would go up about $12. And as I mentioned earlier, if we would have put all of desal as a fixed charge, this increase would have been about $20. That's why we didn't even model it. So what does that mean on the 3 customer types that we talked about previously? For a 4-unit customer, their bill will go up $10. And that makes sense. I don't like it. It makes sense because of the readiness to serve charges going up so much. The average customer would go up about $5, and the 30-unit customer would go down about $20. So this isn't one that I'm recommending. I just wanted to put it out there to show you what would happen. And then the third one, which is the one where the board has the most discretion on, is the property tax offset. And as I said, I modeled 75% of it to tier 1 and 25% to tier 2. But we'll see in a minute that we can use like a sliding scale, like a switch, and do it 100 to tier 1 and 0 to tier 2, or the opposite, 0 to tier 1 and 100 to tier 2. And I'll show you what those look like too. So with this particular one, we'll just get down to the bill. Your 4-unit user would see an increase of only about 59 cents per month, or 1.1%. Our average customer would see an increase, excuse me, of $1.84, or about 2%. And our 30-unit customer would see a decrease of about $4.36, or 2%. And I think I'll stop here because I'm going to do some other modeling or show you some other modeling in a second. But if there's any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments, I will take them now.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you.
Mask, please.
For all 3 of these scenarios that you've described, does the tier 3% change decrease? Did I see that?
So yes, if you're talking about the $8.34, is that what you're asking for, this portion of it?
The percent change and the dollar change for all 3,
Yes.
the base, the desal, and the offset, the tier 3% change goes down and the tier 1 and tier 2 increases.
Correct. So the base, the scenario 1, it would show, let me get to that one real quick. So the scenario 1, sorry, and I'm going to try not to flip back and forth, but we'll get to the scenario 1. So the scenario 1, the tier 3 rate would go down about 16%. For the scenario 2, because most of the, because a lot of the charges are going onto the fixed charges, all of them are going down, but that would be the biggest decrease in tier 3, 24%. And then for scenario 3, it's, I think, 8 or 9.2%. Okay, are there any other questions right now?
Yeah, Mike, I have a question. The
Sure.
property tax RDA offset, which you said is about 2.45 million, how is that currently allocated to costs in the budget?
So right now, it's offset as a universal offset. So, for example, if the revenue requirement is $45 million, we would reduce that revenue requirement by $2.5 million, and it would get distributed. If you remember that slide that John showed with the buckets filling up, it would be distributed in that same methodology.
So it really gets diluted amongst a lot more categories. So what's the effect on rates in the current?
So that would be that base, that scenario 1 that I showed. That one, let me bring it back up real quick. This would be the scenario 1 where the property tax is just being allocated to offset the tier 1, 2, 3, and readiness to serve in that proportion according to those buckets.
Okay.
So the difference between base scenario 1 and scenario 3 is you really are taking that property tax and offsetting tiers 1 and 2. Get back to that one.
Gotcha. Director Hernandez has a question.
Yes. Mike, if $1 million were dropped at our door and we allocated it to offsetting this increase, how small, or what would be the pennies per unit that we would save?
Well, we have about 6 million units of water that we use.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our demand is about 6 million units of water. That's a demand. So if you were to, there's different ways to allocate that $1 million, for example. So you could allocate it on fixed charges. You could allocate it on tier 1. You can allocate it on tier 2. If you were just going to allocate it across the board on commodity, it'd be about 15 to 16 cents per unit of water.
So if I heard you correctly, if we found this $1 million at our front door and we put it into our rate increases, we'd save 15 cents per tier across the board.
If that's the way the board decided to allocate it, correct. And I want to move into your neighborhood that drops $1 million on your doorstep.
Well, I'm just saying, if we found $1 million, we'd be saving a great deal of money on each of our tiers. Isn't that right?
Right. Correct. And on a average customer that uses 13 units of water, it'd be about $2 a month.
Would you go back to scenario number 1?
Sure. Give me a second. Bring that up for you.
So 15 cents per tier, even in scenario 1, instead of going up 32 cents, it'd only go up 17 cents, is that right?
That's approximately correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, we just need to find that bag of money at the front door. Or a couple of bags.
I have another
So
question.
what I want to,
Another question from Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you, President Ellithorpe. I have one more question. Why is it that only Tier 1 and Tier 2 are allocated the money from the 2.45 million? Do we have a policy against that, or is there a law against that, or is that just historically the way it's been done?
I'll try to take that, Mike. So you may recall that we had the kind of a board workshop, and I believe it was before Directors Boyd Hodgson and Pennick joined us, but the board felt that they wanted to make rates affordable to the lower and middle and average customers. So that's why staff took that approach, and they said, let's take that discretionary funding and apply it to the customers that would benefit most according to the board's guidance. So there's nothing, no legal restrictions that would prevent you from applying it to Tier 3, but we didn't feel that that would be consistent with the board's direction.
We have a question from a member of the audience, Ms. Martin.
Yes, good evening to all of the directors and the new president and vice president. I wanted to ask you, is an HOA considered a Tier 3 customer because we have a 4-inch meter?
I would say there's no such thing as a Tier 1, 2, or 3 customer. Each customer has a certain allocation within Tier 1, within Tier 2, and within Tier 3. It's common that HOAs and large users of outdoor irrigation go into Tier 3 commodity pricing within their billing period.
Since my HOA, Madrid Manor, is a master meter, we have a 4-inch pipe, and so all of the water goes through one pipe, and then it is distributed to the 330 homes. So I guess my question would be then, the bill goes directly to the HOA as a Tier 3 customer, because every month we obviously use more than a single-family residence.
Well, again, they're not a Tier 3 customer. That's not our language. But if you look at the slide that we're showing here, if you look at that, the line that Mike's highlighting there, so the 3-inch and larger, that would fit the Madrid Manor. So for Madrid Manor, in a monthly basis, they get 430 units of water at Tier 1 pricing. Once they go above 430 units, then every unit of water is charged at Tier 2 pricing until they exceed 1,190 units, and then that increment of water gets charged at higher rates. But all customers get the benefit of the lower cost water for their first tier allocation. Customers with larger meters just tend to get a higher allocation of cheaper water.
Then my second question would be, how many people do you consider to comprise an average single-family residence?
I don't know if we have those numbers, but it would probably, for that type of usage, you're probably looking at a household of about 4 people in the household.
It's very curious because I'm a household of 1, and I use 12 units a month. So I'm being compared to a family of 4.
Well, again, we're not billing you as an individual at Madrid Manor. We're billing the HOA that used water according to our pricing structure that was approved. And the HOAs tend to have more outdoor irrigation, even if it's a Madrid Manor type, have more outdoor irrigation than a typical single-family home in proportion to the indoor use that they have.
And if I may, I just studied this for another HOA. What I found is that in those HOA environments, the residents are basically, you're paying for your share of the shared space landscape.
We have a separate bill that we pay that is for the HOA common area usage for water, sewer, trash, electric, gas, we have our individual houses, and then we have a budget that we have to pay our dues against for the common area usages of all the utilities. So whatever water is being used for the common areas, irrigation, clubhouse, and that kind of thing, we're paying that separately.
Okay, well, your situation maybe is obviously different than the one that I studied at a different mobile home park in town. You know, it's hard to say without looking, without doing a full analysis. You could have a leak underneath your home we don't know, right? So.
Well, the community has changed my meters out 3 times since I've been there 11 and a half years, since there is a prescribed number of meters that are changed every year to make sure that the weights and measurements are correct. And each time they have determined that my meters are accurate. But I'm using an average of 12 units a month, but that's considered strange to me when I compare that to a single-family residence of 4. My usage is the same as a family of 4.
President,
Can I continue?
go ahead.
Yeah, I would, if you're comfortable, Ms. Martin, I would love to have coffee with you, and if you could share your copy of your bill. I did this recently with some other mobile home residents last weekend, actually, and we went through it line by line. There's a lot of uniqueness to it. For example, your management company's definition of a unit may not be the same definition of our unit. So we define a unit as 748 gallons.
That's what we use.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
So those are the types of things that I think if we kind of look at and kind of dissect, and I'm more than willing, this is.
We could definitely take that
This is a
offline.
topic that's near and dear to me, and I've been spending a lot of time on it, so I would love to learn a little bit more about the unique parameters in your situation.
Oh, thank you.
And may I suggest, because I was trying to do it here on my calculator, but I got lost, if you can break that down then to the number of gallons per day per individual, that might be more helpful, because as I was doing it, it came up with an astronomical number that can't be right.
Yeah, the number looks like it's about 10,000 gallons of water, and I know that, if an average person is using 100 gallons a day, there's no way that I get close to 100 gallons a day.
It's about 225 per day.
Yeah, so I always compare it with my bill, and I consider myself somewhat of a kind of an average San Marcos family, 2,500 square foot home. I have a teenage daughter. I have
Good luck.
at different times either a mother-in-law or a father-in-law, somebody staying with me off and on, and I very rarely go over 7 units in a month.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that I'm using 12 units.
Yep.
Absolutely, I would love to take that offline.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
I appreciate Director Sinella's offer to help. I think that'd be wonderful.
That would be very nice. Thank
Come to
you.
my house and explain my bill to me? It's way the heck over that.
Okay, let's continue on, Mike.
Okay, so I'll
I want to go back to this one real quick, just to refresh your memory of the 75-25. So what I also did, I told you this is where the board has discretion. We can go 100, 0, 0, 100. So what I did is I modeled a bunch of them, and I'm going to kind of mess up your eyes for a second. Now, I don't want you to really pay attention to this slide. Pay no attention to the slide behind this curtain. I just wanted to show you that I did a lot of different modeling. I did 12, 13, 14, I think, different scenarios from 100% offset to tier 1 with 0% offset to tier 2 to just the opposite, 0% offset to tier 1 and 100% offset to tier 2. There were some that stuck out that I like to further show you. So the ones I want to show are the A, C, E, and F columns. And what I'll do is to draw your focus a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to magnify this for a second. Hopefully this works to bring it up. Okay. So let me explain A for you. Well, let me first go backwards and go F, because this is the one that we've looked at several times. This is that 75-25. Tier 1 rates would be 380, tier 2, 492, tier 3 to 834. Because all of these scenarios are only offsetting tiers 1 and 2, there's going to be no change in your tier 3 costs and no change in the ready to serve. So I just wanted you to kind of get familiar with how this little worksheet's set up. If we were to apply 100% of the $2.4 million to tier 1 revenue requirements, then the tier 1 rate would go to 353 and the tier 2 to 513. I did an 88.5 and 11.5. You're wondering why are you doing 88.5 and 11.5? I'll explain that in a second. But the rates would go to 365, 503. And another weird one is the 78.22. The reason I did this one, it's evident right here, is that it doesn't change the tier 1 rate. It's 377 to 377. So I kind of reverse engineered to have where the tier 1 rate would not go up. And let me show what that would mean to the average bill then. So for a 4-unit customer going across from 100% down to 75%, you can see that their bill wouldn't change significantly. It's it's about $1 change for each one. And for the average single-family resident customer we talked about, their bill would only change by about 15 cents maximum from one to the other. And a 30-unit customer, now we talked about a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. There's no such thing as a tier 1 customer, tier 2 customer, tier 3 customer. A customer that uses tier 3 water, remember, they're also using tier 1. They have to fill up the bucket for tier 1 and tier 2 before they get to tier 3. So let me explain real quick. Oh, here's my definitions. So the column A is 100% of the tax revenue offset to tier 1 and 0% to tier 2. So the 88.5%, the reason why I picked this weird looking number is that a 4-unit customer, if you look right here, so their current bill is $51.63. Their current bill under the 88, this is column C, would be $51.62. So again, I reverse engineered it to not affect the low unit customer if that's what the board's pleasure was. And so the 78.22 I mentioned was to keep the tier 1 rate, at 377. And the F was just because we modeled that previously, I thought it best to include it because that's what we showed to the finance committee. So what does that mean to the average customer? You see the bill numbers here, but let me show you the dollar change and the percentage change that would affect these customers. So for a 4-unit customer, again, remember the A, C, E, F. So for the A, their bill would go down about 50 cents. The C is what I mentioned that their bill would hold stable. The E methodology, keeping tier 1 rate at 377, their bill would increase 47 cents. And F, their bill would increase 59 cents. So that's how you rate it across for all 3 of these low user, average user, and a 30-unit user. Percentage-wise, the 4-unit customer would see anywhere from a negative almost 1% increase to about a positive 1% increase. So very negligible. The 13-unit customer, again, anywhere from a 1.8 to a 2% increase. And the big GER difference would be in the tier 3 customer, a negative 1.3 to a negative 2%. And again, I modeled these. It's the board's discretion. It's a sliding dial. We can turn that dial up, turn that dial down, whatever the board would like to see modeled. So I think I'll stop here then and see if there's any questions before I go on.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
A little bit in line with what Director Hernandez was asking about finding money. So for me, I mean, the only one that's even somewhat worthwhile considering is your last one here at the 2% change. I think that's your recommendation too, Mike, right?
It was previously. Now I would say it's kind of anywhere the E and the F, but
Okay.
the changes are so minimal, 12 cents, you see, that it's really,
So what is that, for the lowest of the options, the one where we use the offset and all that good stuff, what does that rate increase equate to on an annual basis? What's that dollar amount? How much more revenue is that gonna bring to the district?
overall for the district?
Yep.
Well, let me put it this way. It's not going to bring any more revenue to the district because the revenue requirement is already set. I don't have that amount offhand, but it's based on our budget. So it's 45-ish, 48-ish $1 million. So all of these scenarios bring in the same amount.
No, I understand. I'm not asking like which one brings more. I know it's a zero-sum game, but I just want to know what that amount. I'll let you know where I'm going with this. If it's $1 million, as Director Hernandez mentioned, or $2 million, I understand what you're saying with regards to the budget's already been established, and that was the opportunity we had to cut if we were going to cut something. But we do have one more bullet that we could maybe use, and that is to subsidize our rate increases with reserves. And so I'm trying to figure out, is that $1 million that subsidy? Is that a $2 million subsidy? Is it a $10 million subsidy? I know it's not, but I'm trying to exaggerate a little bit. But that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, offhand, I don't have that number. Oh, Wes?
If I can interrupt for just a minute. I know we mentioned finding $1 million and it offsetting bills by 15 cents per unit. We have to keep in mind that would have to be a recurring $1 million. So we'd have to find $1 million per year in order for that offset to continue throughout time, because the budget's based on the rate model is based on a 5-year forecast. So we smooth out those rate increases. If you find $1 million now, you lower it by 15 cents per unit, you're going to have to collect that next year because you won't have that $1 million again. So you'd have to find a recurring $1 million per year, just to clarify.
That's a good point.
And it's actually more than that, because in the first year, it may be $1 million, but in the next year, it's another $1 million and whatever other cost increases came your way. So it compounds on itself. And at some point in time, your reserves can't support the revenue requirements, and then you're going to see really drastic, sharp rate increases to get back on the revenue curve.
Yeah, that's kind of the fallacy of a rate stabilization fund. It's fine as long as you use it, but there comes a point where you don't have any more there and you get hit very hard coming off of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so to reemphasize that, let's just say we picked F, and let's say we picked F and we took 15 cents off of that. But let's say next year that tier 1 had to go to $3.90 for some reason, which is only a 3% increase. If we one time offset this to 365, the following year it's going to look like it's going from 365 to 390. So that reiterates Wes's point that it's really a one-time offset. So it would make the following year look like a double increase. So that's a one negative or a con against doing something like that.
Right, and that 10 cents would be to recover the previous year's discount, but then you'd also have to add in any additional increases this year. So it's going to be 390 plus. So then you're going from 365 to say 395, which would be the normal increases. So that's the complication with $1 million.
I understand that, and I appreciate it. I'd still be interested in the number. Not saying it's a good idea.
We can get that for you.
I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just curious what the number is.
Wes, do you know what the change in the revenue requirement was in this study?
The change, no. I'm looking at the revenue requirement now. It looks like it's $49 million for this rate model.
And I thought it was in the 46 million range the previous year.
So that's including all the interest and property taxes. So Mike, it's either 45,718 or it's the 49,654. I think we're.
Yeah. I feel more comfortable getting back to you with that, Director Snella, rather than throwing out a number and then having to retract it.
That's fine, Mike, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you, President Elitharp. So as a board member who was not involved in the original conceptualization of this structure, I'm going to challenge a couple of the assumptions that I've heard play out just as we've been sitting here. We've heard from one of the constituents how she uses 12 units of water and she is a family of one. And we've heard from one of our directors that uses 7-ish units of water and it's a family of 3, potentially 4. I'm wondering if the idea of reallocating some of this money to Tier 1 and Tier 2 is a bit faulty. I appreciate that there was an attempt to do this in an equitable way, but I'm wondering if, in fact, that's what we are doing. If the assumption is that Tier 1 and Tier 2 is always the folks that need it the most. So I have that question, and I'm not necessarily saying that we need to rehash this. I appreciate that I wasn't on the board when this was developed. But it sounds to me like we might not, if we are truly trying to achieve equity and provide a, kind of a break for the folks that need it the most, I'm not sure we're accomplishing that. I'm happy to be proven wrong. It's just what I've gathered just from sitting here listening to some of the folks in the room.
Let me just take one stab at that. For the customer to be in Tier 3, they would be getting the benefit of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 offset as well. So it's not just that you're a Tier 3 customer and you're only paying Tier 3 rates. You would have had to gone through that if it's a 5/8" meter, that's 0 through 6 units and the 7 through 21 units. So you would have achieved that offset, the property tax offset already if you are using Tier 3 water.
And President Elitharp, if I may add, I think we're talking little apples and oranges. Ms. Martin's example, I think she's talking about a sub-meter. So when we're talking about the meter, we have one meter that services Madrid Manor. It's a 4-inch meter, and that's what we bill on. How the HOA allocates their costs amongst their tenants is up to them. Sometimes they just use some methodology. They may divide it by the 300 and whatever units they have, or they may install sub-meters. The sub-meter is not a district device. It's not monitored, maintained, operated by the district. I can't account for its validity. It sounds like Ms. Martin is saying they replace the meters on a regular basis. I can't speak to how that meter is measuring the water that goes to each customer. So I would be careful when we take the anecdotal stories and try to correlate it with the district's metering program.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so let me go to the next slide. So with the RDA, with the property tax offset, John mentioned earlier that we had the board pricing objectives workshop was it last year? Time flies. So doing this type of a scenario, it maintains the affordability for the essential and average use customers. So it'd be approximately 2% increase. Then it equitably allocates the water supply costs. So desal is not just applied to Tier 3 water. And it also maintains customer understanding because there's no major structural changes to the bill. So there are incremental but substantive improvements. So using the approximately $2.5 million of revenue to offset Tiers 1 and 2. And again, it could be a varying percentage. We've modeled different ones, the 75, 25, 100, 0, 100. And then it allocates the cost of waters across all tiers, as we mentioned, the San Diego County Water Authority, the contract with OMWD, and the contract with the desal water. So that's a wrap up with that. I have two other small slides I wanted to show you, but I wanted to make sure see if there were any other comments or questions on this.
Doesn't look like it.
I do actually,
So
I do have one more question. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. It's okay.
So one of the scenarios that you talked about is a flat rate. And what you've described is very complicated, and I would argue most of our customers, it's difficult to understand. What are the advantages or disadvantages of just using a flat calculation? The amount of water you use, it's the same price. What would be the revenue gap, if there is one, if we did something like that?
Well, I might ask John to help me out on this.
Yeah, let me give it a shot. When you think about a flat rate or let's call it a uniform dollar per HCF rate that everyone pays, I think you could argue that there's a pretty substantial inequity associated with that rate structure. Because if you're a customer that has a fairly low amount of water usage, let's say it's year-round indoor usage and very little or only moderate amounts of outdoor irrigation usage, you're going to be paying a rate, just pick a number of $6 or $7 per CF. Similarly, the customer that has large outdoor irrigation demands, maybe it's a single-family residential with a large outdoor irrigation needs, is also going to be paying that same $6 or $7 per HCF. And what that uniform rate per HCF fails to recognize is this concept of peaking costs. Because remember, the customer that only really has indoor usage or minimal outdoor usage really imposes lower peak demands on our water utility system than the customer that has a lot of outdoor irrigation. That customer with a lot of outdoor irrigation is imposing max day and potentially max hour demands that really drive up our cost structure. And that uniform rate per HCF that everybody pays ignores those peaking costs. Whereas the current rate structure, with some of the potential modifications that Michael is outlining, reflects these max day and max hour peaks by virtue of having 3 tiers. So I'd argue that having the tiered rate structure is far more equitable than just a uniform charge per HCF.
So I would add, when the consultant talked about the demands and the peaking impacts, what that means, peaking impacts means we have to build bigger pipelines, bigger pump stations, bigger reservoirs, everything's bigger to handle those surges, those peaking that are mostly driven out by large users. Somebody who only uses 3 or 4 units per month in their home, if everybody used that kind of consumption and didn't do it all in one 15-minute period, all of our facilities would be smaller, our overall costs would be lower, and our rates would be lower. So when we go through the cost of service, we try to find a way to fairly allocate it, recognizing that different customers place different demands on the system, and a lot of that's driven by their monthly consumption.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it seems to me that a uniform rate like that doesn't meet the requirements of Prop 218, because it seems like you're subsidizing those larger users.
I would tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Director or President Althorpe, but I would say the flip side is true. I'm not aware of any agencies who have uniform rates that have been sued under 218.
Okay.
Because that's what those advocates are challenging. The 218 rate cases are always challenging this cost allocation. And as John Wright has suggested, I mean, the peaking rate, how you apply that peaking rate becomes an issue. Is have you equitably allocated that against users, because it is a mathematical function. But that is one of the advantages, at least from not being sued. I've always argued it is, you're subsidizing things on a uniform rate, but those agencies don't get sued.
I'm only aware of one agency in San Diego County that does uniform rate like that, and I think it's Valley Center. And they did it specifically to protect themselves against Prop 218 challenges. The net effect of something like that is what you'd find is it's going to drive up the cost for the lower users and drive down the cost for the larger users. So whether that's fair or more legally compliant, the net effect is that it has that impact.
Director Snow?
I think that it's worth noting that right now, there are basically 2 challenges that have come through the San Diego County Superior Court associated with tiered rate structures. One of them involves Otay Water District, and the other one involves the city of San Diego. And they're Prop 218 legal challenges. And what the challenges revolve around, and by the way, I'm not your legal counsel, nor am I an attorney, so take this for what it's worth. But what those legal challenges revolve around is the tiered rates associated with single-family residential customers, and how the tier 3, 2, 1 rates and those relationships were developed and then applied to single-family residential. But when you think about the district situation, the district doesn't have a single-family or a multifamily or commercial customer class. The district has customer classes by meter size. And one of the things about the district having customer classes by meter size is that the district's done a pretty extensive analysis and has looked at the variability of demand on a theoretical customer class basis versus the current meter size based classes. And really the current meter size based classes are more homogeneous, meaning that there's less variation in consumption in each meter size based class than there might be if you went with a single family, multifamily commercial approach. Right. Now that doesn't insulate you from a Prop 218 challenge by any means, but two current legal challenges are based on customer class rate structures. You've got a meter size base rate structure. Whether that insulates you or not, I don't know, but I think it's a key difference.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of a follow-up question along those lines is, you know, when we talk about low water users and big water users, I'm in my head, I automatically go to your residential users and then your commercial or your agricultural users. I think of Cal State San Marcos obviously uses a lot of water with all their grounds and their student population, etc. Why don't we have a separate residential and commercial rate structure that would at the end of the process combine to meet our revenue requirement?
I'll take that real quick. So real quick, that's one of the things that we did look at. And when we talk about that, we're placing meter size. Let me go back to that one slide. We're placing meter sizes as the customer type. So we found that there was a lot of, and John said the homogeneity, there's less variability in the meter sizes. So your Cal State San Marcos or Hollandia Dairy would be in these larger meter sizes. So they are grouped together with similar usage demand type customers. And like I said, there was less variability between those, which made a tier structure like this more equitable.
Yeah, and so one way we might think of it is, let's say we had a commercial class, just as an example, or just a broad non-residential class. Well, that class could theoretically have everything from a small insurance agency in a strip mall that only has a lavatory and a kitchen sink, up to some very large commercial customer that uses water as part of their overall production process. And so there can be a great deal of variability amongst this broad commercial class. A lot of customers that use very little water, a lot of customers that use a lot of water, and there's a lot of variation around the average or the mean. And what the district's done in its existing rate structure, when we're basically recommending maintaining the same structure, is that when you look at the variability of water usage based on meter size, it's much more homogeneous. It doesn't have as many outliers as if we just went with a commercial customer class. And one thing I would note is that although perhaps customer class-based rate structures by type, multifamily, commercial, industrial, may be more common, there are a lot of rate structures that are built around meter size just like this. And the American Water Works Association has a publication. It's called Principles of Water Rate Fees and Charges. And it's kind of an industry standard discussion of cost allocation and rate design. And one of the things that American Water Works Association publication notes is that meter size based rate structures can be an effective way to have a tiered rate approach, just like you have, as long as there is homogeneity, i.e. consumption characteristics that are similar within each meter size. So I think you could have a class-based rate structure by land use type. What you have really is a class-based rate structure based on meter size right now, and it's not like it's all that unusual. It's not like you're the only utility in California that does this.
Yeah,
Thank you, John, that makes sense.
and I would add that both the M1 manual that John referenced and the courts have held that it should be based on your usage, your particular agency's characteristics. So several years ago, when we developed this rate structure, we compared the usage by meter size and we compared the usage by customer type or customer class, commercial, industrial, and we found that it was much better represented by meter size. There's more homogeneity in there, so that's what we went with. And remember, one of the three principles that the board adopted was understanding of the customer. And if you change things drastically, it's going to be very difficult to explain to the customer why their usage may not have changed, but their rates went sky high or plummeted. A structure like this, staying with the by meter size, I think, is more understandable, more predictable, and better represents our customer base in Vallecitos service area.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I guess we can proceed.
Okay, so there's two other items that I wanted to quickly discuss. So one of them is drop rates and pump zone charges. John alluded to them earlier. So drop rates, like back in 2015 when we had the 20%, I believe it was, imposed reduction in usage, what that does is most of the reduction is in our tier 3 revenue. So our revenue gets hit pretty hard while our cost, the expenditures don't go down as much as our revenues are lost. So one of the things that we used to have were drop rates that we went to coordinate with since Chris did a drop rate ordinance last month. And let me show you kind of what that looks like. And again, a lot of numbers. And let me see if I can zoom in to kind of focus. Oops. 1 second. So let me go right in here. So our current demand, I said we have about 6.1 million units of water as our demand. If there was a imposed 10% reduction, the reduced demand would be 5.5 million, and the same similar for 20% all the way up to 60%. That's column B. Column C is the revenue that would be lost. So the commodity revenue lost on a 10% reduction is about $3.7 million in revenue that we would lose. The corresponding expenditure savings, because we don't have to purchase water, we might have a little bit less chemical costs, a little bit less power costs, would be about $2.2 million. So let me see if I can arrow over. So what that would do, I'm actually gonna unzoom so you can see it all. So column E shows the net revenue loss on a 10% reduction. So what a drop rate would do is we take this $1.4 million in lost net revenue, divide it by the remaining demand in 100 cubic feet, and come up with a drought rate. So for example, in this instance, a 10% demand cutback would be about a 26-cent per unit surcharge for drought rates. So this is very common in San Diego County. OMWD does one almost exactly like this. A couple other agencies do it exactly like this, where they just take the net impact on the budget and divide it by the remaining units of water. So that's one of the things that we want when we come back in January sometime, is to discuss putting in the ordinance drop rates.
And Michael or Glenn or Wes, correct me if you disagree with this, but I think what would happen is we would list those drought rates in your Prop 218 notice, but of course, the board would take separate action to implement them. And at the time you needed to do that because you were in a drought emergency, I don't believe you would need to go through the standard 45-day notice period. You already noticed it in the original Prop 218. You just need to take separate action and you could put those into effect.
Yeah, that's
Right,
correct.
so-
We'd only have to do that one time with the Prop 218 process to establish the drought rates, and then subsequently, if a cutback was required by the governor, the board would have to take the action to declare a level 2 or a level 3. Remember, we're in level 1 now. I had the authority to declare that, and that wouldn't trigger any of these demand cutbacks, but each subsequent one would be a board action which would trigger these drought rates once they're adopted and coupled with our drought response plan. Mike, what else
There's
did
no
you have to cover on
questions.
that?
Oh. Excuse me?
What else did you have to cover on this one, or?
Oh, nothing. I just wanted to put it out there to show this. And like you mentioned, putting it on the Prop 218 and doesn't automatically increase the rates, even if a level 1 or level 2 was declared. It would have to still be a board action. But this protects us from having to do a 45-day notice and another Prop 218 and all that. And doing something like that would cost probably about $50,000 to do all the noticing.
And I
This
would
would
say
save that time.
And the board would have discretion, so let's say, for example, the governor wanted a 30% cutback. If our board wanted to take some different action and say, hey, we're gonna declare the level that corresponds to 20%, we don't think that customers are really gonna cut back 30%, so we think it's gonna be more in line with 20%. These are all projections, right? They're all estimates on what we think the behavior would be and what the demands would be. So the board doesn't have to be exactly what the governor said, but the Prop 218 process would give you the ability to do that if you thought that the reduction in consumption would be similar to what the governor called for.
Would this drought rate this unit rate be applied to all tiers?
Yeah, in this methodology, it would be applied for every unit, every tier is all impacted the same.
Glenn, does this account for our reliability for the desal and the lack of required cutbacks for that water?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. So one of the reasons that Vallecitos entered into the supply contract to purchase desal water is it may insulate us from required cutbacks. So that's a good example of why our board may do something different than that the governor asks for. He may say, hey, everyone should cut back 30%. We could make the argument that we have a local reliable supply. We're not dependent on Colorado River or Northern California water. So we think we shouldn't have to follow 30%. Maybe we'll only plan for 20 or 10%. So ours could be a little out of step with the governor. But that all depends on what the action the governor takes is. He may or may not recognize local supply reliability. In the past, the state of California does a lot of one size fits all, right? They don't want to look at the specifics. They're just going to say everybody has to cut this much. But even then, even if the governor did that one size fits all, that doesn't mean that we have to adopt the drought rates that correspond with his required cutback.
Okay.
And if we're wrong, excuse me, Director Penick, if we're wrong and we set it at 20% and people actually do save 30%, then we would make up that revenue out of reserves. And that's a good example of when you'd rely on reserves because your estimates were a little bit off.
So clarification on these numbers, these are annual?
These are annual.
So I mean, a drought cutback is usually not an annual request. I mean, correct? I mean, usually it's a 2-month or a 4-month or something. So we're looking at
Correct.
12 months right here.
The numbers that Mike shows in this is assuming, because that's the first number, 6.2 million units, that's
Right.
for the whole year.
That's
So
the
you're
end.
right. If we declared a drought in the summer, it may be 2 or 3 or 4 months, which is not proportional because most of the usage is in the summer, but it wouldn't be a whole year's worth of impact.
That's what I was looking at the impact. I don't think, that's a huge impact, and that usually it's what, a 2 or 3 month drought requirement?
Yeah, but if you look at,
Right.
Director Pennick, but if you look at column F, that would be the amount that each of the tiers would go up, not the tiers, but the units,
For that period of time?
for that period of time. So they're just coming up
Correct.
with a number.
All right.
Right. Exactly. So if there's no more discussion on this, I'm going to go real quick to our pump zones. So we alluded to it earlier, the pump zone charge offsets the cost of lifting water to higher elevations in our district. We have 10 pump zones. I believe only 9 of them are active. The rates were last updated on July 1st, 2019, so almost 2.5 years ago. And since that time, SDG&E costs have increased over 12% since then. So to show you, what I did is just put in a proposed 5% increase. Again, this is up to the board's discretion. I just threw it in to show you what the impact would be. So our current pump zone rates range anywhere from 11 cents to, I believe the highest is 65 cents. And that again is because the double peak, it has to have raised to a higher elevation.
And the 5% increase would only be like for the double peak, so it'd be a 4-cent increase per unit of water. So the increase would be to kind of realign our revenues with the cost of providing the lifting of the water to that specific elevation. So this is another thing that we want to bring back in January. But again, like I said, I wanted to kind of give you guys a kind of a flavor of what the increase would look like if it was 5%.
Yeah, I have a question on that, maybe for the general manager. I thought our intent was to update that yearly after we went through that pump zone exercise.
Yeah, and I'm going to look to Mike to remind me of that. I think that was the goal, but I think in COVID, it kind of got frozen in time.
Yeah, because
of
the reason we got so out of whack previously and the reason we had to fix it is because it wasn't touched for years and years.
Yep.
Right. That's correct. We went back in 2018, I believe, is when we started looking at this to be applied in 2019. And we did a 3-year catch-up. We wanted to try to get anywhere from 90 to 95% cost recovery on this, and we are a little bit out of whack.
I think it was 2017, Mike, because I was board.
Oh, you're right.
I was board president, and
2017 to
we filled up this room 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's the most I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was 2017, and it was 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019. You're correct, yeah. So the last increase was 2019.
And I would add for our 2 new board members, I would add for our 2 new board members, this does not recover all the costs associated with pumping. This is just the electrical component. It's a portion of the electrical component. We're not trying to make the residents at the higher elevations pay for all the infrastructure that went in. They're not the only ones paying for the pump station and the pipes and the storage reservoirs and all that. It's just the extra cost of getting the water up there.
And I believe it was 95% of that cost.
Yeah,
because
correct.
we saw a benefit to everybody for that last 5%.
Yeah, there's some storage that the lower elevations could benefit from having the water at higher elevations.
Exactly.
Clarification on that, oh, sorry. So this is, for example, Coronado Hill, 60 cents per what?
Per unit of water, per 100 cubic
unit.
foot.
Per unit.
So
Okay,
this is
that's
on
per
top
unit.
of that, so remember that number $3.77?
Right, okay.
This would be on top of
that's-
that if you live at elevation.
Okay, so that's per unit. And then does the installation of that solar that we put in, does that offset any of this?
We'd have to figure out how that gets applied. So the solar that was done at the Lift Station 1 site would only benefit Lift Station 1, but the ones that were applied at the Twin Oaks site were benefiting numerous meters, and I'd have to double check and make sure these meters were on that list.
I thought that's, when we took the tour, I thought that was part of the selling point as well, that it would enable the operation of the pump stations to operate less off-peak, as well as helping move the water. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, so the installation of the solar wouldn't help with when you ran the pumps unless you had battery storage along with that. So the installation of the solar itself didn't help with our off-peaking. It helped with our cost of electricity whenever we chose to use it, but off-peak is usually in the middle of the night, and the solar certainly isn't generating any power in the middle of the night. So you'd have to couple it with large-scale battery storage to really see that benefit.
So I think all of the accounts on the RESBIT rate that are large solars out at Twin Oaks, I think pretty much all those accounts are these pump stations.
I think they are, because I know we had 20 or 30
This is the majority of the electricity use of the district.
I don't know that I'd say it's the majority. It's by number of meters it may be, but it's not by usage. Meadowlark is our.
Well, yeah, excluding Meadowlark,
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the water side.
Right.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I had on the pump zones.
I have a question from Director Hernandez.
Yes, so since 2019, San Diego increased 12%, so about 4% per year. Is that the way I'm reading this?
Yeah, and that includes some of the offsets from the solar cost too. This is the actual bill increase. So if we have seen some benefits on the solar, I haven't looked at the bills detailed for each of these pump zones, but that would be a 12% net increase.
Right, and so that plus or minus 4% a year, and so we're proposing an increase of 5% to cover that differential.
Yeah, and I probably shouldn't have used the word proposed. I should just put just put an example, so I apologize for that. I just wanted to kind of give you, how much would it be? Is it are we talking 2 cents per unit, or are we talking about $1 per unit?
Yeah,
So
okay.
please strike out that word proposed, because it's up to the board. It's your decision.
Well, I see a bit of a problem, I mean, using something like 5%, because that's about what the average cost increases annually for SDG&E and the other investor-owned utilities. So, again, I'm a little concerned that we haven't adjusted these since 2019. I think we should have been doing that all along. Okay, that's my comment. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so then some of the next steps, we mentioned that we would like to develop some multi-year rates. That eliminates the need to have to go out to a Prop 218 vote every year. And like I mentioned, it's probably anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 to do a complete study and mail out the mailers and everything. And then have some sort of annual pass-through adjustments for years 2 through 4. If you remember, the Water Authority told us that our rate increase would be about 3.6% back in April and May. When all was said and done, it came out to 6.8, I believe. So not being able to adjust by the amounts that they pass through to us would put us in a bind. And then the drought response rates that we mentioned a couple slides ago. And then the other thing I should have put on there is also look at the pump zone rates. But then just looking at a calendar, back in November 22nd is when we went to the Finance Committee to present a shortened version of this. Today we have the budget workshop. In January, we plan to have a second budget workshop at a date to be determined. And then from there, what we would do is send out the develop and craft a Prop 218 notice, and then mail that out. And once we find that date, there's a 45-day window. So from that date to the public hearing has to be at least 45-day noticing. So then the public hearing would be a to be determined date sometime in March, with rates to be effective as if when the board approves them. And if it was approved sometime in March, then it would be bills mailed out on or after April. And the customer wouldn't see the effect, wouldn't have to pay that specific bill until sometime in May. So there is a lag between the time the rates go into effect and the customer would actually have to pay that, in this case, the proposed 2% increase for the average single-family resident customer. And that's the end of my presentation.
So this is, I may remember I mentioned earlier that it'll be about 2 years. So you look at the schedule, the last time we adjusted rates was in March of 2020. So by the time, if the board chose to increase rates, it'd be a 2-year period. And some of the numbers, 2%, we feel it's reasonable. And this does not include sewer charges. So we didn't mention that, but I want to clarify that the Prop 218 process is for water only. Sewer, we're going to keep the rates the same. So when you looked at a combined bill, a typical customer is both a water and a wastewater customer. So instead of that $96, if they're used about 13 units, add another $40 on top of that for their sewer, and so that dollar something it may be going up is out of $140, not $100. So the percentage is actually quite a bit less on a combined bill than the charts that showed here. So the dollar amount is still the same. It goes up $1 or whatever, but when you compare it to the overall, the total bill, I think as a utility, the rate increases are very reasonable.
Yeah, it'd be about 1.3%, Glenn.
Thanks, Mike.
Director Hernandez.
Yes, at our next workshop, could we get a chart or a slide showing the water rates for the rest of the county, so we can see where we are in our, we're in the top third or the bottom third?
Yeah, we will.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mike.
And one thing I want to caution, and I've been saying this the last couple of times when we're trying to compare to other agencies, is now the other agencies, it's getting so convoluted. Some of the items are putting on a property tax bill. Some of them are variable and they're not in their rate sheet. So being able to compare apples to apples between us and a neighboring agency is getting a little bit harder. So I just want to caution with that. The other thing I want to caution is the MWD refund that we just sent out. Forgot the amount it was, 1.5 million dollars. Some agencies are using those to offset future rate increases. So what that's going to be, if we compare us to them right now, their rates are, and I'm going to say artificially low because they're using that one-time money to offset the rate increase that would have occurred this year. So when you look at if we're in the bottom third, bottom fourth, or whatever, it's going to look a little disproportionate because it's going to make our rates look arbitrarily higher than maybe a neighboring agency that's using that money to offset. We gave that money directly back to the customer. So I just want to kind of warn you guys about, the fallacies of trying to do rate comparisons.
Yeah.
But we will bring that forward, and we'll.
Absolutely.
We'll note where we think they're good comparisons and where they may be problematic comparisons.
So what direction are you looking for tonight?
Well, we certainly, first of all, is to elevate the level of understanding by all the board members, because the two finance committee members had a head start. Hopefully, we've accomplished that. So what I'm looking for is there a scenario that the board prefers? The base scenario, put the decel on the fixed charge, or this use your discretionary revenue? If the board wants to choose scenario 3, then it would be helpful to know where do you want to slide that lever? Let's say the board wanted to go with that use discretionary revenue to offset tier 1 and tier 2 water. To what extent? Do you want to put it all on tier 1, 75-25 like the finance committee saw? Enough information so that when we come back to the board in the January meeting, we have specific information, and we'll have less scenarios and more specific details on the scenario that we think that the board is looking at. With the hope being that at that meeting, assuming the board is comfortable with that, information would go into the Prop 218 notice that would be mailed sometime later in January.
Well, I guess in my own opinion, I'm pretty comfortable with the scenario 3 option, but I don't think I've come to any conclusions on, the level within that.
Yeah, you'll notice if you spend time and look at that third scenario, there's really not that much difference. When you slide that lever back and forth, to me, it didn't make sense to put 100% on tier 2. You really should probably start and have most of it on tier 1. And that's, most of the scenarios you saw, it went anywhere from 100% to 75% of that 2.4 million going to tier 1. So it's not a huge variation.
Well, I guess for me then, the staff's recommended would be fine, but I need to hear from everybody else, I guess, as far as giving direction.
Well, personally, number 3 is fine, but I'm sort of leaning towards item D, where it's,
sorry,
excuse
it should say
me,
E, but
item
it should
F.
say E.
Item F, where it's 75% to, no, item 2.
Sorry, I
I want the
mislabeled them 'cause I changed them.
75% in item 2, in tier 2.
Can we ask you why?
Because I think most people end up in tier 2,
But everybody ends up in tier 1.
right. And we set that up for the small user. But for the average user, you go out of that 4 units, 6 units,
But
in 10 days. So if you're going to get a benefit, let's give it to the majority of the ratepayers.
wouldn't 100% of the ratepayers get it? I mean,
Yeah.
every 100% of the ratepayers go through tier 1 before they get to tier 2.
Right, so if you put it on tier 1 benefit, everybody gets that benefit for every unit that they utilize. If you go into tier 2, you're going to get a smaller benefit with a lesser allocation in tier 2, but you've already received the majority of the benefit in the tier 1 water you used. So I think it really does benefit the majority of users to put the 75%. If we're going to use 75% one way or the other,
Yeah, right.
you're better off and you're going to
Okay.
benefit a bigger customer class.
I didn't understand that. Okay, fine.
And I apologize if we weren't clear on that.
Anybody else?
My 2 cents is, staff has done an amazing job, and I too would take their recommendation. They've heard us, tonight, we've had a good workshop. We've heard them, they've heard our little concerns. I have full 100% trust that, they'll go back and maybe tweak a few things and whatever their recommendation. And we've heard them, they've heard us, they've heard little tweaks, and we'll hash it out, the next workshop.
Yeah, of course, I'm in favor of no rate increase, so if there's two others, I'll want to go along with me, I'll definitely vote that way, but, assuming that wouldn't be too wise to do, I think in the times that we're living today, with inflation, the cost of electricity that we talked about with increases, I think all of our electric bills have probably gone up over the last year or two. The cost of groceries, the cost of gasoline, the cost of labor, I think a 2% increase over the last 2 years, I think we need to really reiterate that, right? This is not a 1 year, it's been 2 years, since we've had a rate increase. To have it just 2%, I agree with you, Director Pinnick. I think it's a testament of a great job by staff and our consultant that they put this together, because our household costs have gone up more than 2% across the board on everything that we buy, and to be able to do that, I think is pretty impressive. So, assuming that we can't have zero, I'm good with this option 3.
And when you take wastewater, it's less than 2%, it's like 1.3, which is, yeah, I agree.
Director Boyd Hodgson, any thoughts?
Thank you. I do agree with my colleagues that this is a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate your patience explaining it to us again, Mike. I feel like I feel like I can agree with the 2% increase, but I do want to acknowledge that it's not, when a customer gets their bill, they're not going to say, oh, my bill is exactly 2% higher. For example, I live in Double Peak. Mine is going to be 2% higher on the rate, and it's going to be 5% higher on the pumping charge. And if we implement drought rates, it's going to be even higher. So the net result isn't just a 2% increase, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that. We can get in the weeds about how, oh, it's really only a 2% increase, but in actuality, when people write their check, they could be paying more. So I definitely want to acknowledge that we are not just talking about 2% more out of families' pockets to pay for water. I am not sold on the idea of drought rates. I think it sends the wrong message. I think that if we find ourselves in a position where we need to recover money because of drought, because of climate change that we can't control, then I think that is motivation for us to try to acquire more local water sources rather than asking our customers to pay for to pick up that slack. And I know that's why that was one of the selling points of the desal plant. So I'm not on board necessarily with drought rates. I think that it sends the wrong message, and I think that there's no incentive for us to conserve water if we continue to try to recover the cost from our customers, if I'm understanding it correctly. So I will go along with what the majority says, but I think that I'm going to have to look at this a little bit further and run some scenarios about how this is going to impact my constituents, because my constituents are going to see higher increases than other folks.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just clarify on the electricity piece of it? It is a 5% increase, but it's a 5% on the previous electricity increase or electricity rate. It's not a 5% total increase on a unit or a bill.
Correct. It's a 5% increase only on the utility, on the pump zone surcharge portion. So you noticed even in a higher one, so say Double Peak, for example, zone 8, 4 cent per unit increase on the bill. So a person using 13 units, they're going to see a 52-cent increase over that month.
So Mike, remind me, Mike Arthur, remind me, what percentage of our residential customers are in a pump zone?
Sure. So right down here on the bottom, there's about 3,000 customers are in pump zones. So it's about 14%, maybe, give or take. So this shows, I should explain this chart a little bit better. These are the number of customers that are in these pump zones. And I said we have 10 pump zones, but only 9 of them are currently active. It's about 3,000 customers.
Okay.
nice view you got.
And President Elitharp, if I can get clarity, and maybe I need help from Mike too, was there a recommendation that you indicated, Mike, within the scenario 3 on the allocation of the discretionary revenue? I just want to make sure we all walk away so we know which scenario staff is looking at.
But for me, if you're gonna ask my opinion, I think the sweet spot is C or E. But that's my professional opinion, but it's board discretion at this point. I think I like the fact that C is tied to the board's pricing objective of having it affordable for our low user. They would not see a bill increase. And I also like the fact that holding tier 1 kind of steady, and it's tied to that. But again, it's board discretion.
So like I said, that's the direction. I hear that the board seems to be coalescing around scenario 3 where we're going to use the discretionary revenue. So could we maybe see a show of support for the columns listed as A, C, E, or F? C, I see a C over there by Director Pennick. Do I hear B? Do I hear?
Yeah, it's fine for me as well.
Yeah.
Okay. We will come back. I'm seeing lukewarm, but of those expressing an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, they're all, it's pretty minimal
Yeah,
differences. I mean,
Yeah.
One of the things I
like
personally,
C, actually.
one of the things I like about C is if people say, why did you pick C? It's like, well, we tried to keep no increase for our lowest users. That's the philosophy. The fact that it's 88.5%, that's irrelevant. I mean, your objective was to try to keep it flat for the people that probably can afford, maybe able to afford increases the least.
And there's some encouragement for conservation doing that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take that as go forth with what's listed as 3C.
The only thing that would help me just as a customer, and we've got tiers 06, I mean, if it shows how many gallons, that would help me with conservation. If it shows, hey, the Pennick household used, 11,000 gallons this
Yeah.
month, do we do that, or is there a
didn't
thing
we
that
add
shows
that?
in their tier 1 is 748 gallon, I mean, one unit is 748?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there?
It definitely shows that.
I guess I gotta look at my bill, but,
Yeah.
I seem to have deja vu that, didn't we add the total amount of gallons
I think
per bill?
I think we did because we also included a cost per gallon.
Yeah, I think we do. I know we
Do we?
include the cost per gallon. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember if we have the actual.
About 4 or 5 years ago, we did that.
so it does show it on customers' bills, I don't know, I mean, that would help.
Here's what we could do. Maybe next time we come back, we'll bring a copy of a bill.
That would be
And
great.
then we'll walk the board through what a customer sees.
Yeah.
And if there's any changes to the billing that the board would like to see, we can incorporate those at that time.
Because just seeing those big numbers would help me as a customer, seeing, man, I'm going through 25 gallons a month.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got to conserve or do something different, but if I just see 7, 8, 13 units,
yeah.
doesn't mean anything to me, but 25,000 gallons means something to me.
I think I would prefer A or C.
A
Or
or
A or C.
Okay.
And let me just add one thing. The one con about A is that applying 100% to tier 1, and it's actually a con to all these scenarios, I just wanted to let you know, is that for some reason, the state were to take away our revenue, something like this hasn't happened since probably back in 2000 when they were doing the triple flip and all these kind of different things, is that this offset would go away. So applying 100% to one tier would have a harder impact if we had to reverse it. That's just my only thought on that.
Yeah, and if something like that were to happen, we'd probably come back to the board and say, hey, we need to do a
Right.
new cost of service study because it drastically changed the structure that we had put in place. And then those things typically take several years to work through the state anyway.
Okay, are we all set on that item?
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
So I only need clarity on if you want me to come back with, because I said proposed on the pump zones. What would you like to keep it at the 5%? Would you like me to model different numbers? I can model different numbers and then show the impact on a bill with everything inclusive, water, sewer, pump zone charges and everything.
Any input on that?
I would offer up that I could do a 5% and a 12%, and then you can look at it, and again, you can go anywhere in between.
That sounds good to me.
I personally don't need another, chart, I mean, as long as I'm understanding it. So let's take Double Peak. You're proposing that it goes from 65 cents a unit to 69 cents a unit, so that's a 4-cent increase. And if a house in this particular zone uses 10 units, their bill would go up 40 cents a month.
Right.
I think I have a good enough understanding.
Yep.
Excellent job, Mike and John, thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
hope the
Appreciate
board
your time.
appreciates, there's 1,000 scenarios we could have brought forward. So
Yeah.
we tried to limit it so it was digestible, but we're happy to look at any other scenarios, but
Okay, can we move on to the next item?
please.
We're all the way up to 2.2.
We certainly can.
So,
Don't blame
Thank you,
me
John.
for this long meeting.
You're in charge. Man, President Elder, his first meeting, we
I know.
spent 2 hours on one item.
Through a cost of service study. Okay, 2.2, water service shut off moratorium.
yeah, we'll try to catch up, make up for some lost time here. So the district may remember that we curtailed shutoffs on water service for non-payment back in February of 2020, and that was before the state took any action. The state, in April of 2020, they prohibited shutoffs. It wasn't up to you as a local agency. You had to, you couldn't shut people off for that. And that was done by executive order, and that original executive order was scheduled to terminate on September 30th of 2021. So knowing that September 30th deadline was looming, we came to the board on September 15th of 2021 and to discuss that with the board to say, hey, if we can resume shutoffs in October, would you like us to? And our board voted 3-2 to say, yes, resume your pre-COVID shutoff practices. Let me spend a minute to talk about that. We bend over backwards to work with our customers. If it's really geared for the people that are non-responsive. We reach out in multiple ways, phone calls and texts and door hangers and knocking on a door, and they just don't respond. Those are the ones that'll get shut off. Virtually everybody else will reach some type of an agreement. So anyway, on September 15th, the board said, yes, go ahead and resume your pre-COVID shut-off policies and practices. 2 days after that, the governor extended it, and he said, okay, it's September 30th is no longer the deadline, it's December 31st. So now we find December 31st deadline looming, so that's why we're here tonight. So, but I'm taking, the way the board voted last time, they said when you're allowed to resume our pre-COVID shut-off practices. So I'm here to inform the board that that's our intent, is that starting January 1, we're going to be resuming the pre-COVID shut-off practices. There's a caveat on that. Remember, we are participating in the state arrearages program. So the state is giving us money to help our customers that fell behind on their bills. There's some special considerations that have to be given. So in order to shut those people off, you have to do 3 things. One is you have to have credited those customers with any money that you've gotten through the arrearages program. 2 is you have to notify them that there's that they have an opportunity to set up a payment plan even after whatever arrearages have been applied. And 3 is you have to give them 30 days to make arrangements. So if you do those 3 things and still after 30 days they have not called in and made arrangements for a bill payment plan, then even the state through the arrearages program says you can resume your normal practices. So all we're looking for is to inform the board that that's our intent, is that we're gonna, on January 1, we'll resume our former customer-friendly practices and be cognizant of the state arrearages and SB 155 and make sure that we don't jeopardize the funding we got. So with that, I don't need any specific direction. It was more informational only. But happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, any questions? I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, moving on, 2.3, 2022 strategic plan.
Yeah, and I think this will be quick too. So the board recently completed its 2022 strategic planning efforts, and the board did provide some input, and Chris is going to walk you through that input and how we've reacted to it.
If I remember how to run.
It's been a while, huh?
Yeah. How long has it been?
Yeah.
I'm at a loss to explain.
2 months. words, right?
Yeah, so, strategic plan, we had a presentation back on, November 3rd, 2021. And not a whole lot of items that the board was specifically, maybe I should take this off. Not a whole lot that the board was looking for, really just the fact that the board wanted to include the words climate change in one of the sub-strategies 6.1, and then also again on 6.2, making sure we put the climate change text in there both times. And then we had some talk about a possible vision statement. And in your packet, I offered up some vision statements. But the other thing the board can do is decide not to include a vision statement. That's okay as well. So if you'd like me to list off the vision statements, I'm not seeing my my PowerPoint up on the screen.
It's,
Well, it's stuck on, is that doing it?
no, it's up on here, but yours gonna see the notes.
Can you help him share his screen, Jonathan?
It is shared.
I thought I was shared, but, oh, maybe new share?
No, you're sharing. Yeah, what's up here is what everybody's seeing.
But
So you're seeing this.
gotcha. So here's that strategy 6.1 with the words climate change in it. And then strategy 6.2 with the words climate change in it. And then I had offered up a vision statement, and then Director Boyd Hodgson recommended this specific vision statement for consideration, but also asked for some other examples to be a best-in-class agency for water, wastewater, and recycled water, best-in-class utility that recognizes all urban water supplies as resources, surface water, groundwater, stormwater, and wastewater, best-in-class special district, if we want to use that terminology, that recognizes the urban water cycle as a single integrated system, to be a best-in-class utility with a passion for one water, to be a best-in-class utility being mindful stewards of one water, to be a best-in-class utility of one water for a water secure future, to be a best-in-class utility with an unwavering commitment to protecting one water. So we could use the words agency, utility, or special district in the vision statement. And if we want to choose a vision statement, if the board wants to choose one tonight, that'd be great, and we could finalize this, or we could also just choose not to have a vision statement. And I would add, I don't think leaving a vision statement out of it detracts from the work the board did and the importance of what was identified in the strategic plan.
Okay, well, I'll open it up for discussion.
Is there a way to put them all on the, can you put them all up on the board at the same time?
I don't think I can. It's in the board packet, in the board report. And I could maybe do that.
What do you recommend?
I like the one that's up there. I like to be, best-in-class utility, and I think Director Boyd Hodgson kind of nailed it with utility for one water. I like it, and that's going to be a terminology we're going to hear more and more as we move forward into the future, and I think that's what a vision statement is. It's a statement for the future. Yeah, I agree. It's a kind of a new term for a lot of people, but they are going to hear more and more about it. That is kind of the term of art in this industry, so I think people will come to accept it, and they may view us as saying, well, they were ahead in the early stages, so.
I mean, my opinion is I don't have any strong ones, so a recommendation from is whatever, I mean, you're there and you've got it. So that's my opinion, is using your recommendation is fine for me.
Director Sinella.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion about the vision statement either. I do have a question about the one water term, and I understand, I mean, we're throwing that term around a lot in SENA as well these days. But what specifically is Vallecitos Water District going to do towards becoming a one water utility? I know what we're doing currently with Meadowlark and recycling a portion of our wastewater, but that we can't even use ourselves, so we sell it to other districts. But I don't envision Vallecitos putting in all that infrastructure to ever be able to really truly become a one water, water district. So, I mean, are we being a little bit false advertising?
No, I don't think so, and I think I can answer that. The board approved money in the budget to do a feasibility study for a direct potable reuse project. So we want to, we're in that lane. We're moving forward to that. Having said that, we're also working collaboratively as a partner with Encina because they have a project that may become direct potable reuse. So we're actually looking at 2 tracks to be at the forefront of one water, in addition to the work we're already doing with recycled water.
If you're comfortable with it, I feel like it's just a little bit of a stretch, and and then seeing this thing so long. I mean, I keep hearing $600 million project and divided up by 6 of the agencies. So I don't know where we're going to come up with $100 million for our share, but that's a long ways away. But if everybody's comfortable with it, I guess I can go with it. But it's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, these potable reuse projects are extremely expensive, and I think everybody recognizes, those that do it need big monetary help to make them happen. And I see the federal infrastructure bill in helping that.
Hope so.
Yeah. Go ahead, Director Hernandez.
No, I'm good with it. I do think moving to one water, we're going to get there. We might be ahead of our self here today, but I think we're going to get there in the next, I hope, 5 to 10 years, and then we'll be cutting edge. So I'd leave it where it is.
That's why it's the vision and not the mission.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I support the proposal that's up on the screen. I appreciate Director Boyd Hodgson's input on that.
Really appreciate you all saying that I said this. I don't remember
You don't
saying
remember
it,
saying
but
it.
I really appreciate it.
Credit, yeah.
Accept it.
Yeah, I would just go with it.
I mean, yes, I agree. I support this fully.
So I guess the staff recommendation would be to finalize the strategic plan with any changes that we get today. So the changes may be, we like that you put climate change in those 2 places, and we're okay with the mission statement or vision statement that was on the board, and then we're done.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and so once the board approves the strategic plan, the staff are already working on the tactical plan. I've been working on it. I know the other supervisors and obviously the management team as well. So recommendation that you approve the strategic plan with the changes that we made.
Okay.
I move to approve staff's recommendation, the strategic plan 2022 as is.
With the changes noted.
Yep, understood.
And I can second.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Boyd Hodgson, seconded by Director Hernandez. Please vote. Passes unanimously.
Good job, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, moving on to 2.4, water supply conditions update.
All right, Chris is going to give that as well, and obviously we had a good rain yesterday, not just down here, but in Northern California, so Chris will try to weave that into his presentation.
Yeah, and this is killing me a little bit in that the board report that I set up was a week ago, and the real talk at that point was how there wasn't going to be any water coming in on the state water project. So, am I showing this okay? Jonathan, are you helping me? That looks better.
There's more water today than there was 2 days ago?
Yeah.
In the report?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was, last week, Governor Newsom has proclaimed the drought, emergency conditions. In his proclamation, he noted that he wanted people to save water. And on November 30th, State Water Resources Control Board put forth a bunch of comments of potential proposed emergency regulations. Comments were due by noon on December 23rd. I put in some comments. There were some, most of the emergency regulations are ones that are in our existing ordinance, so we're pretty good to go. And, but I did offer some comments to the State Water Resources Control Board. We're in a drought level 1 voluntary watch. Here's some nice news. I don't know if I can use Mike's pointer as well as he does. I don't know how he was doing that. But you can see the current line. It's the blue line on the left on December. So this is before this recent rain here, where we're way ahead of what the average is as far as precipitation on the 8-station index. This was as of December 7th rather than now. And so I'm excited to bring you a report next month because I think I'm going to have some really good news. And that's good to see. The snowpack water content, I don't even think they've really done an analysis of it yet. But this was some of the figures from before. I think they were saying this was 15%. But that's going to improve. California reservoir storage, Lake Oroville is at 30%, and then San Luis at 24%. And those numbers moved up from the previous report. I watched these and I report them to you, and so they popped up a little bit. And obviously they're going to pop up again in the next month's report. Colorado River shortage is still in existence. Hopefully we see some improvement there. The good news is the upper basin precipitation to date, 82%. So, but Lake Mead and Lake Powell are still at 34 and 29% full respectively. So let's hope we get some improvement on the Colorado River figures. 3-month temperature output locally, again, we're above normal favored on the temperature. 3-month precipitation, below normal favored again, but again, this was a good rain for us, and I was happy to get it. One of the items I did want to share was Director Boyd Hodgson had asked, how are we really doing? And I'm really going to caveat this. This is Vallecitos water sales data for November of 2020 and November of 2021. And the figures are down about 22%, kind of across the board. Mike probably gives you figures in your board report that talks about GPCD figures, and you might see some figures and you go, hey, what's the disconnect on those two figures? Is I gave you water sales data, so this is really what the customers are using, and water ops people had taken some of the tanks down to clean them, and then they filled them back up again. So we increased storage in our tanks during the month of December, but the water sales data showing what our customers are using, it's down, which means they're doing a good job. So that's good news, and lets us know that our customers are keeping after it. Conclusion, we're in 11-1 drought watch. January 4th, State Water Resources Control Board will consider RESO to adopt those emergency regulations. Almost every one of them is in our existing drought ordinance with existing water use restrictions, things that you can't do. You're not supposed to irrigate when it's raining, that type of thing. And then again, customer water consumption was down for the month of November, and I'll be back with December's report next month, and I think I'll have some really good information for you.
Can you go back to your year-over-year comparison?
Yeah.
That was interesting. Residential. So I'm looking at residential, and I know who knows how COVID might have, changed things in 2020 versus 2021. I think we were open for the most part, but population is definitely higher in November 21 than it was in November 20. So it's pretty impressive.
Well, and I talked about this with Mike quite a bit. Mike and I both work on the same floor, and he's a great guy for me to talk to about these types of figures and, some of the ebbs and flows that you see in specific things. And he was pointing out to me that a lot of times the commercial sector is improving because they're getting back into business. Doesn't show a lot there. It's only like, seven units, but the value of being able to talk to him and discuss you know, what it is that we're sharing, what information we're talking about, and where we see little anomalies. And just for my chance to educate the board a little bit, sometimes you can get some strange anomalies over you know, you're comparing these 2 months against each other. But just the way the holidays fall can change the water consumption figures, just a touch. If Veterans Day is on a Friday or a Monday, it's gonna change things a little bit versus if it's in the middle of the week. It's just kind of the way things work out sometimes, that some people will take a vacation, disappear for a few days, and will get a little, you know, go down, or it might go up.
So do you know what the weather was like for
Yeah,
this?
the weather makes a big
Yeah,
difference.
the weather's
Yeah, and
one
what
of
I
the
probably
biggest.
could do is see if I could put a weather factor in there, because that definitely makes a big,
Right.
big difference.
That's one of the biggest variables.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, particularly when you look at short periods of time, like a month. When you start looking at running averages over time.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a
just
short
one
trend.
big storm in either of those years could
So
cause.
I had a question though on this, because we don't like we talked about earlier with Mike, we're not classifying residential irrigation agriculture clients. Is this based on meter sizes, or is this?
So all of our customer accounts typically have a class assigned to it.
So they do have a class, okay.
So that, and then it could be more for sewer specifically than it is for water.
Okay.
But there is a customer class assigned to it, and
So we- okay.
single family, multifamily, they all get put into residential. You know, even the commercial accounts, a lot of times will have a different label on them.
Yeah, we have all that
The
data in there.
hospital-
We just don't bill by that.
Yeah,
That's not how
hospital
our
versus,
That
you know,
answers it, thank you.
school.
I had a question, Chris. Has DWR done an initial state water project allocation?
And
Was
that's what I was pointing out, was they were saying that you weren't gonna get anything
It's
from
zero.
the
Was it
state water
zero?
project.
Was it- the initial
It was
was
a
zero?
big fat zero.
Yeah, so
And-
that-
And I'm interested to see what they say after this big storm.
I don't think they're gonna change, they typically wait a while to
Yeah,
change
they
that.
probably
Till
wanna
they get further
hold the
into,
cards.
you know, the precip for the 50 station goes to April 1st, so they wait pretty long into
Yeah.
that to change that.
Yeah, but this is a good storm, this is good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, so don't jinx it by saying how good it is.
Right.
Things can dry up in
Isn't
an
there like
instant.
some country song, rain is a good thing, you know, I should play that and give it a star.
Chris, you're gonna come back next month with the
Yeah.
update? Can you include this month's reservoir levels so we can compare this month for November versus December?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had the opportunity to tour Lake Oroville, and it's massive.
Oh.
But what I've seen is that it goes from being very low to overflowing pretty quickly. And so it'd be interesting, I'm not saying it's gonna overflow from this one storm, but I'm really curious to see how much it increases.
Yeah, the other good thing is that these storms we got, there was snow in these storms, and snow is much better than rain. As the snow sits on the mountains and slowly melts, and that's what the state, all of us want, is this slow snow melt over the summer.
What's the
versus-
biggest impact of climate change is turning what we used to get as snow into rain and having it run off sooner to the oceans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this. I appreciate you doing that work. Thank you.
All right, the last action item, 2.5, committee appointees and representatives.
Yeah, so each of you should have a copy in front of you of the President Elitharp's proposed committee appointments and agency representation. And I'll turn it over to President Elitharp to guide the discussion.
Okay, well, these are my recommendations based on input I've received and what I felt was best for the organization as a whole. And so I'll open it up for discussion. I'll entertain a motion on it or some alternative motion or whatever the board chooses to do.
If there's no discussion, I'll move to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Sinella, seconded by Director Hernandez. Any further discussion?
Director Pinnock, would you want to make a trade?
A trade,
Mm-hmm.
it depends.
I really like serving on GPAC. would you want to be on Aqua Energy or Aqua Water Quality? I'll trade you.
You're listed as an alternate right now on GPEX.
Yes.
So,
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I thought it was a misprint.
so are you currently an alternate, and that would continue as an alternate?
I'm currently
You're currently.
I'm currently the delegate
Right.
for GPAC, but after tonight, you will be the delegate and I will be the alternate. So I'm wondering if I have a bargaining chip that you would like, Aqua Energy or Aqua Water Quality, in exchange for me being the delegate for GPAC.
I see. And just out of concern for you, because I know you are a busy mama, and there's other things on your plate, I'm.
That's okay. I have to try. I have
Yeah,
to try.
I don't know. I mean, I would say, I think that's a good right there for you, GPAC alternate with what you got on your plate, to be honest. And
Okay.
I have no interest in the other ones.
Okay, okay.
All right, any other discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none, let's vote.
There we go.
All right, it passed unanimously.
It was a good try.
All right, that's the end of the action items. That brings us to reports. General Manager.
Yeah, 7 items, I'll try to be really quick.
Whoa.
So Don McDougall is not the only long-serving employee who will be retiring in December. So Lee Kirby, who's our construction inspection supervisor, will be retiring on December 30th. Lee's been with the district for 22 years, so we're losing a lot of experience there. We've already hired his replacement, hasn't started yet, but he's on board. Similar to Dawn and Larry, her husband, Lee's wife used to work here. Gina Kirby, she ran our IT department, so she oversaw what Matthias has right now. Yeah, so I misstated that, but she retired from Vallecitos several years ago. So now Lee can enjoy his retirement with his wife, and congratulations, Lee, for all his years of service. 22 years, that's a long time. Just a reminder that there is a meeting of the City of San Marcos General Plan Advisory Committee tomorrow. So the GPAC is having a meeting tomorrow. It starts at 6 o'clock, and it'll be held in the city's Community Services Building Main Hall, located at 3 Civic Center Drive. Director Boyd Hodgson is our representative for that effort currently, but it just switched, so I'm not sure when we want to transition, but the meeting's tomorrow, so I'll let the two of you work that out. On January 11th, the city will be issuing a proclamation to Vallecitos to acknowledge our assistance in providing them what they call hydration stations at several city parks. We were able to secure some grant money. These are basically water bottle filling stations. So we secured the money to purchase the devices, then we worked with the city to install them at several parks. And they want to issue us a proclamation, and I would suggest that President Elitharp, if you're available on that date, it'd be nice if you can go accept the proclamation. And again, it's January 11th.
Okay, I'd be happy to do so.
Just a question.
Sure.
Thank you for that update. Can you bring a picture of what those look like?
Yeah.
And show, because I believe that Mayor Jones and I brought this to your attention probably a year and a half ago, and maybe 2 years ago with COVID, time flies. And she had asked me, I think a couple months ago, like, hey, where were we with this? I didn't have an answer, because I didn't realize that you had worked on it. So that's a huge success, and I would like to maybe have a brief 1-slide, 2-slide presentation on it.
Sure, we can do that.
And did you happen to include anything for dogs?
Yes.
I'm sorry, for what?
For dogs?
Yes.
One of the things we asked
Yeah.
for was
Yeah,
that
it
they
has
had the dog bowl, water bowl too.
Right, it has like a higher level, then it has a drinking fountain, then it has a low level for the dogs, for filling
Man,
bowls and things like that.
You made my night. I didn't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see.
But before you go on, Ms. Martin's had her hand up, and she must be getting tired, but real quick if you could, Ms. Martin.
Yes, thank you. I wonder if you could put on the website a chart of the new committee appointments, please, so that we can
Yes.
know who's on the committees. Thank
Absolutely,
you.
we'll have that updated.
We will, it'll be on tomorrow probably.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's right. Let's see. Oh, wanted to let the board know that we have initiated the process to refund the money that we got back from the Water Authority and Metropolitan lawsuit. So remember, that was $1.25 million roughly. The refunds, as a reminder, will show up as bill credits to qualifying customers, and almost all current customers qualify. And it'll be based on meter size. So it takes a month for us to do all the billing cycles, so this whole process should be completed by January 12th. So by January 12th, all the money, all that 1.25 million should have been refunded. Just a reminder that the January 5th meeting will not be held. It's too close to the holidays and give the board and staff time to extend their holidays, and it's hard for us to put a board packet together that close to January 1st. We're looking to reschedule that meeting to January 12th. And one of the reasons we're doing that is typically we may just cancel the 5th and wait till the 19th, but the 19th is when there's the CASA conference, and we're not going to have a quorum. We have 3 directors that want to go to CASA, so we won't be having the meeting on the 19th. So I'm suggesting if it meets all of your schedules, that we have a meeting on the 12th, and we would just do what's appropriate to reschedule the 5th to the 12th.
Just one meeting in January.
Probably, because then I wouldn't want to put one on the 26th, because then it compresses our getting ready for the February. It's just too tough. So we'll try to squeeze everything we can into the meeting on the 12th. And lastly, I just want to wish each of you a happy holiday season. So I hope you get to spend time with your loved ones around the holidays. And tomorrow morning or tomorrow early afternoon, I'm getting on a plane to go back to Chicago to visit my parents. So
Wonderful.
wish you all happy holidays.
You're already wearing the sweater.
Same to you.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm going to a Chicago Blackhawks game on Friday. And the Nashville Predators. That'll be fun.
All right, move on to district legal counsel.
Just one short item. As you know, there's been the pending Kestner litigation, which is the statewide 218 case in which Vallecitos is one of 82 defendants. We had a hearing on Thursday on a motion to dismiss that we filed on behalf of Vallecitos and 5 other districts in San Diego. It was joined by others. The tentative ruling came out, we had the hearing, and the tentative was to dismiss that lawsuit as to Vallecitos and the other San Diego folks. The judge took it under submission. We'll issue a ruling probably after the first year, but it looks really good and solid. So
That's great
Good,
news.
good news.
Good.
So that's the gift for the holidays, and I hope you all have a happy holiday.
Same to you, thank you.
Yeah, we're ending with a lot of good news.
Okay, San Diego County Water Authority, not much to report. We have a special meeting, board meeting scheduled for tomorrow, a very short meeting to consider extending remote board meetings. So that's the only item we'll be taking up tomorrow. Okay, Encina Wastewater Authority.
I'm gonna do the capital stuff and I'll do the policy.
Yeah, the capital committee, capital committee approved a change order for the primary area improvement of total about $500,000. That's that big project, if you remember, that they had the wall that was deteriorating and we changed the skimmers in there. It was a big project. And it was delayed because of COVID and missed a timeline with a dry weather season for allowing them to start. The board approved that today, and we're hoping to finish that project probably in February. That was the capital side.
And on the policy side of today's board meeting, the big item that we took action on, kind of an interesting one, but the Encina board had requested the percentages of Encina employees who were vaccinated versus not vaccinated, and we found out that only 68% of the employees were vaccinated. So the board decided to put together an incentive, and what staff came up with and what the board approved was a one-time $1,200 offset to employees' medical insurance cost if they get vaccinated by, I believe it was February 28th. It was in February. Was that February 28th, Jim?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, and it was done so to be equitable to capture those who are already vaccinated. So as long as they're vaccinated, as long as you are vaccinated by February 28th, then you'll get the incentive.
Wow.
So, with the goal of having 100%
Yeah.
vaccinated workforce. And well, in doing our analysis as a board, we really recognize that the impacts of COVID on our workforce, while we've been very fortunate and lucky that we haven't had a lot of workforce absences and whatnot because of COVID, we do recognize that folks who maybe have to stay home because they were a close contact or something like that, it does have a financial impact on the agency, and that our hope is if we can have 100% vaccination rate for our employees, that'll lessen that impact.
What's the financial impact of that incentive?
It's costly. What was it? It's
58
yeah,
to 80,000, and there's a potential reimbursement being discussed. The thing that caught my attention was that no one that had been sick with COVID had gotten the disease while at the Water Authority. So I think they've been doing a good job, a great job actually, of keeping the place compliant. So the thing passed. I did want to also mention that we did hire Scott McClellan to take over the management of the Water Authority. There was some items that needed to be addressed in his letter of offer, if you will, and we're working through that. The subcommittee has seen at least a preliminary review of that letter, and we're going to take it up here in another day or 5, and then approve it to go to Scott for further discussion. I'm sure we're going to get to a solution. It's some great finalists, and it wasn't an easy decision, but we came to a decision that Scott was the man.
All right, thank you. Next, standing committees. Any reports on standing committees? I have one for engineering committee.
Yes.
Yeah, the engineering equipment committee met on December 6th. We had a pretty short meeting. We had 3 items for discussion. One was the Metal Arc Reclamation Facility Aeration Basin Improvements Project Update. The second was Emergency Bypass Rehabilitation Project Update. And the third was the Maintenance Services Department Office Improvements Update.
And then we had a Hillside Task Force meeting on the 7th with our consultant Rick Giddings. They're putting together some numbers for us here at the board so that we can make a decision as to how we want to proceed and to see if we can get the most money for our bang for our buck. And we hope to have that probably in the next month or so to bring back to the board, probably in February, because we're only having one meeting in January. So if we can get that back to the board in February, we can have a nice discussion as to maybe we can find that $1 million on our front door
in the future.
The P3 committee will not be meeting at its regularly scheduled date because that would put it on the 3rd of January, so we're meeting on the 10th.
Okay,
We pushed it off to the 10th.
thank you. Okay, next is directors' reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended. Anything?
Yes, I attended the meeting in Pasadena where we received the award. Interesting, a little more background on that. There were well over a dozen applicants, and we made the top 5. And did I hear Chris say that their video was an hour and something long?
Yeah, that was hour and 20-minute video, plus they did.
Man, I'd have passed out.
Yeah.
I'd have discredited them because it was too lengthy. The other videos, they showed them on the screen were, short and sweet and very, very appropriate. We had a magnificent presentation, and we got a nice little trophy there. So it was, all in all, it was a good report. I will suggest and Ann sent me the list today of what's coming up in the future. Get your decisions made early so that she can get you a reservation at the presentation site. I was in a hotel 6 blocks away, the commute back and forth. I ended up taking a cab because I had to deliver the display, and it's 6 blocks, and the driver wanted to charge me $15. I said, this is outrageous.
We gotta get you a skateboard.
I said, I'm not paying $15. He said, and he didn't turn his meter on, so I knew he was just giving me a hook. So I said, here's $6, go pound sand. I'm saving money for the district at every chance.
Other than that, how was having it in Pasadena? That's the first I've.
Yeah, it was.
I remember Aqua having it there.
It was interesting because the convention center is a block in each direction, and then there's a plaza and an annex, another block. So they got you walking all over the place. That was a little bit troublesome, but we managed.
I wonder if they'll go back there.
And
Yeah, I thought it was
Thank
really
you.
split up.
thank you, BBK, for a magnificent dinner that night, and everybody had a magnificent time. And
You had a maple bacon
I
chicken
surely did.
sandwich?
Maple bacon, yeah, it was interesting. And a very nice place at the Maples, I think is the name of the place, the restaurant. And a nice presentation, and had a great time with your staff. I don't know where you were, Jim, you're somewhere hiding out.
I was in Escondido then.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So on that, while we're on that topic, I don't know if now is a good time to do this, but just input, to utilize my time wisely and the district's resources. Thank you, Ann, for sending this out. Is there any, I mean, based on your experience, I mean, we can't attend all of them, I mean, at least I can't. Is there any, like, you've got to, don't miss conferences, is there any, I mean, is this, should I talk to you offline? Or is that something we can discuss, like, these are don't miss ones, you should go, or these are, you know, it's okay to miss?
Well, it's really personal opinion, I guess, on
Yeah,
what you like to
I
do.
mean, based on your experience.
certainly the CSDA and the Aqua and the water reuse is also a good one, so personal experience.
Just a little different opinion. They're all good, I agree, and don't disagree, but I don't know if I don't see them on here, and I don't know if they've started them back up, but I will tell you what I benefited the most from when I first got on the board were the water tours.
Yeah.
The one that goes to the Bay Delta, and they're usually an overnighter, so they
Yeah, a
fly
couple
you up
days.
there, and then they bus you all the way back down into like Oakland, and they fly you back. And then there's a Colorado River one that starts around Lake Mead, Hoover Dam. You do a full tour of the dam, and then you go drive down the bus, you take a bus down the river, down south. And those, I learned a tremendous, I mean, you're physically there, so I'm a learner, I'm a visual learner, so it was really good for me.
Central Valley, I've been on that one as well, and you finally appreciate the Central Valley. I mean, we know about it, hear about it and all that jazz, but when you go out there and see what I have never seen in my life, 1,000 acres of cotton. This white field, I'm a Michigan boy, so I know snow. It looks just like that, like a whole winter scene. And they have some opinions about water for sure, so put that on.
Have those started back up yet?
To my knowledge, they have not started back up yet because of COVID, but
Okay.
they're getting ready to.
Okay, I think that does it for that item. I think we're to 5.1, Director's Comments / Future Agenda Items.
So I made a comment earlier in the evening that I would like to discuss. We do have a policy in place, and I believe the number is 218 or 216, I'm not exactly sure, but it specifies that each new director will be given the opportunity to be the president during their first term. So looking at the rotation as it is currently right now, in order for both Director Pennock and myself to be president during our first term, one of us should be Director Elitharp's vice president at this time, if we are going to continue the traditional way we've done things, which is you have a president, then you have a vice president, and the vice president succeeds the president. So that is my reasoning for bringing it up. It appears that that is the way that we can cycle through Director Pennock and myself to be in compliance with that policy?
It's interesting you bring that up because I've actually asked for this policy to be reviewed because this has happened before when I was president and I had to throw the potential president under the bus because of this same situation. And it turned out to be embarrassing, painful, and to the point where that director ultimately resigned within 2 weeks. So I think we definitely need to review the policy because it does put Director Elitharp or whoever in a bad spot because of, I think it's a poor policy that needs to be resolved, personally.
Yeah, just point out, this policy has been back a couple of times. I think we've gone over it and over it, but, you know, there continues to be problems with it.
Yeah.
Apparently, so, I don't know, maybe suggest a wider look at the policy. I don't know, not just this one aspect, but.
For the whole policy.
You had the other aspect that came up last year regarding the appointment to the Water Authority and
Right.
this similar language, and
Exactly.
it's mathematically, I think, impossible for 5 people to serve as
In a
the
4-year
president in the
exactly.
first 4 years.
Yeah.
But we can bring it back to revisit and discuss, and, well, it's up to gentlemen.
But I don't think it's not the policy that 5 people serve as president in the first 4 years, because we would never have a complete 5-person turnover.
Right.
And I appreciate the policy because I find that it would be, you know, I think it gives everyone the opportunity to serve irrespective of the majority makeup of the board. So I can appreciate where it comes from, but
So could I
you know-
just stop this, because this isn't on the agenda, we need to, if you want to put it on the agenda for then we can
Yeah,
get
let's
into
do
this
that.
debate and discussion about
Future.
the items, so we need to add it for the future agenda. My question was one of, because earlier I said a motion for reconsideration, but I think if you want to discuss the policy, then that's what we would bring back as the policy for discussion versus the action you took at the last meeting regarding the appointments you made, so, for clarification. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, I don't
You've-
understand the directive.
So one is, we can discuss the policy, put that on the agenda for the next meeting. The second issue would be to reconsider a decision that was made at the last meeting. Those are 2 separate items, so it's just a question, which one you want.
Either of them tonight.
You can't discuss either tonight, yes.
So is the request to review the policy and ordinance, or is the request to reconsider the appointment of the vice president, the currently seated vice president?
My request is to reconsider. I think that in good, you know, I think that it just slipped by us all.
Okay.
So I think that my request is to reconsider in accordance with our current policy.
Then I would request we bring as a second issue, potentially, to bring the whole policy back for a relook completely. Not just last meeting, because I wasn't here, so I don't know what happened, but.
So, 2 points. One is, the reason why that particular language is in that policy today is because I asked and made the motion to put it on there because we were having a similar issue back in 2014, 15, whenever it was. So I do have some, you know, it's still important to me. I think it's worth talking about, but I'm not ready to just throw it out. I think it's worthwhile to keep it some sort of language like that. I will say though,
Just point, if we can we bring that discussion back to the next meeting, since
Yeah.
okay, so
I've cut everybody
I'm in favor
off, so-
of bringing back both.
Okay, so
We'll
we'll
put it
bring
that
it
way.
back for discussion when it's properly
Very
agendized.
good.
Thanks.
Director Hernandez.
A new topic, I would like to see what progress is being made relative to our scholarship situation that we've talked about now. Well, I've brought it up a couple of months now. I'd like to see that move a little further and faster along, particularly after this conference where they were passing out scholarships. young man that got a nice scholarship. So I'm very interested in seeing if we can't find a way to get more people into our profession.
All right, is that it?
Oh, Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year.
Before I pound the gavel in adjournment, I would wish the same to everybody as well. With that.
All right.
Same.